We will go ahead. Thank you all again for joining us. Like I said, I struggled getting up this morning, so hopefully we can all wake up together. Today we will be talking about Module 5, dealing with feelings and behaviors. This is one module that I think is really helpful, especially when families have come to this training hoping to handle this issue. Like a lot of people come to the training because they want to stop or change or eliminate some of the behaviors that their kids are doing. And so this is a module that everyone seems to like and I think has a lot of good information. So I hope you guys will like it as well. Just some quick housekeeping. I think everyone's been on before, but we will take a break every hour just to stretch our legs, make sure we're still awake. I love to see you on camera. It's really helpful to me as a teacher. And I think hopefully you get a little bit out of it more when you can, be more interactive. To the interactive point, please, I just love so much your questions and comments. I learn a lot, and I think all the other participants learn a lot too. So I encourage you to take yourself off mute whenever you have the need to share something. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Maybe. I don't know if you guys have seen this iceberg slide before, this thought before, but the idea is that you see just a teeny bit above the surface, the ice above the surface, but there's a lot more below the surface, right? So if we use that to describe the child's behavior, you'd see some of their behaviors up front, up top. Some of the behaviors that we've talked about are, maybe being verbally saying things, or I know you guys have shared some good examples about kids, struggling at school or struggling at home, any of those behaviors that we might see. Underneath all that we don't see is the child's feelings, thoughts, expectations, and beliefs. So sometimes we get wrapped up and focused on that top part that we can see. But underneath is really where we need to start focusing, because that is really where we can have and make a difference in the child's behaviors. So essential elements 3 and 4. 3 is to help your child to understand and manage overwhelming emotions. And 4 is to help your child understand and modify problems behaviors. We talked a little bit about this last week, about helping them to start recognizing where some of these behaviors are coming from. Obviously, that needs to be done on an age appropriate level. But I think it's something that can be very helpful when you start to tell them, this trigger is coming up in your life. You might have some of these behaviors come up again. What can we do? What coping skills can we come up with? What can we do to help you with this, rather than just have this trigger take over your life? I think when we start to help them recognize the connections between their behaviors and their thoughts, feelings, and actions, that can really be impactful to the child. They give this example of someone that walks into a PTA meeting, or walks into a meeting at work, and you see 2 people over in the corner talking. And when you walk in, they both look at you, and then they start talking more furiously. And you just know that they're talking about you, and that they're probably saying bad things about you, and that they don't like you, and that they think that you're a bad employee or a bad parent, or whatever it is. The story, or the curriculum, talks about how that would make you feel. That if you came in there and you saw this happening, how would you feel? I would probably get mad, or I would probably be one to just get really want to leave the situation. I wouldn't want to be there anymore. Or depending on my mood, I might be the one who kind of goes up and confronts them because I'm feeling very angry. Or you could be, that you're kind of neutral. Maybe you think, oh, maybe they didn't see me. Maybe they're not talking about me. And you just kind of get curious. Or you could get really hurt and maybe really embarrassed. All those things could happen in response to seeing these 2 people talk. And so when you saw that, so your thoughts would be that they're talking about me. Your feelings would be that maybe they don't like me, or I would feel bad, or I would feel sad, embarrassed. And then your behavior would be, if you were mad, you might go over there and start yelling at them. If you were sad, you might go over there and start telling them, crying with them. If you were neutral and it didn't really bother you, you might just let it go and you wouldn't have any feelings there. But our thoughts lead to behaviors, and our behaviors lead to our actions. And sometimes it can start with feelings. So sometimes we can just feel sad inside, and that will lead to the thought of, I'm not good enough, no one loves me. And then that will lead to the behavior of staying in bed all day. The example they use is one that hopefully everyone can relate to. But with our kids, I mean, to me, it's a lot easier to relate this to kids because I see it so obvious with my kids. So and usually with my kids, it starts with a feeling. So I'll see them feel like nobody loves them, or that's a thought. I'll see them feel angry, and then I'll see them act out on their brother and get mad at their brother. So perfect example. Yesterday, one of my sons got a bike for early birthday present from grandma and grandpa, and my other older son got mad, and he came home from the activity that he was doing. And I was like, what happened? Why did you come home? I don't know. I just didn't want to be there anymore. It was stupid. Well, when we went back and tried to figure out why, the thought was what started there, is that grandpa doesn't love me. And so then his feeling was he was feeling sad and mad. And then his behavior was he just left the activity that he was having fun at. So this CBT triangle is something that's helped my kids and me a lot figure out their behaviors. My boys went to a CBT therapist for a while, and they use this triangle quite often. What they would do is they would think about how the triangle played out, and then they would go back and figure out how it could play out differently. So in the situation with my son and the bike, my older son could have recognized that he was feeling mad and sad that his grandpa had given his younger brother a bike. It was for his birthday, but that was why. And then his thought could have been, grandpa's done a lot of things for me too, or grandpa loves me too, and these are the ways. And then his behavior could have been more, okay, I'm going to stay and still have fun at this activity that we're doing. And so the therapist would help them walk through this triangle and kind of change one of the points, and to hopefully change the behavior at the end. And that was really helpful to us. We use this triangle quite frequently. We probably should start using it more, especially with kids. So both of those boys I'm talking about had fetal alcohol. And so it was a very concrete visual way for them to see how their behaviors, thoughts, and feelings connected, and how their thoughts and feelings led to the behaviors. So I don't know, with all these examples, can anyone think of an example that you have seen with your kids or that you've noticed with yourself? Any behaviors or feelings or thoughts that you can relate this to? It's kind of hard. That one example that they give here is my favorite, but I can really easily relate it to my kids. Phil, did you have one? Sorry.
Yeah, and somebody else did too, but
Oh, I didn't see one.
sullen, kind of sulky, and then sudden outbursts of just kind of a verbal detox almost.
And so that would be the behavior, that verbal outburst. What do you think the feeling is there?
The feeling is, I just, I know that this relationship's going to end as well. And the thoughts and feelings are kind of linked heavily.
I agree.
The feelings are, nobody cares about me. Nobody's loves me. It's just going to be a matter of time. I feel that nobody cares. And then the thought is, I want to end this myself. I'm going to push away before they push me away.
Yes. And thank you for bringing that up. The thoughts and feelings for me get really confused and kind of muddled as well. It helps. This slide has helped me kind of more solidify that. So I think of the thoughts as the invisible suitcase, what their core thoughts and beliefs about themselves are. And then I try to think of the feelings as those mad, angry, sad, scared, embarrassed, those feelings that we all label and use. that's how, and so that's how I've tried to differentiate those two, is by those thoughts about ourselves that we kind of just, those invisible suitcase that we just have those thoughts kind of ingrained about ourselves. And then our feelings are more those labeled feelings that we can use. Anyone, did someone else have an example that they wanted to share?
Yeah, sorry, that was me.
Okay.
um, so my foster daughter, when Easter came, her birth mom did not get her anything for Easter. And so her thought was, why didn't she get me anything for Easter? Like, she must not care about me. And then her feelings, she was super sad and emotional. And then her, so her behavior was kind of interesting, because when she came to me, she goes, so my mom didn't get me anything for Easter. Does that mean she's dead? My bio mom. And I was like, whoa, where'd that come from, honey? Like, just because she didn't get you something for Easter doesn't mean she's dead. And she is a worrier. She is my 7-year-old who is a worrier. If she doesn't see her bio mom, that she's dead. That's like what she thinks. And so it's kind of an interesting situation, but
Yeah.
I just have to reassure that she's not dead.
Well, and so this
Oh my
could
goodness.
help you. I mean, and I think 7 is not too young to try it. You know, go ahead and label this thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, and then ask her what her thoughts are, you know, about this mom doesn't love me, or mom's dead, or mom's no longer available to me. Her feelings are being sad. And then see, you know, her behavior is this worrying. Then change it with her. Say, okay, my thoughts are my mom doesn't love me, or my mom is no longer available to me, dead, or whatever. Maybe we can change this thought to mom didn't have money for Easter. And then how would that change your feeling? You would still be sad. At least, you know, I would. I want something for Easter. You would still be sad, but then maybe you wouldn't go over here to worry. Maybe you would go over here to, you know, doing something to distract yourself. So I think it's helpful that we label this for the children so they can start to see the connection there. Do you think that would help her at all?
I think so, yes.
I know with my
Yes.
boys, especially that young age, or those kids that really need something visual, this triangle has been very helpful to them. And that's why we bring it up. And why I'm thinking about it, this triangle is also on your worksheets that you need to turn in. So I'll give you that heads up right now. On the worksheets for 5 and 6, they ask you to kind of do this triangle for your child. So hopefully you've got an idea of what that looks like. Trauma in the triangle says children who have experienced trauma may find it hard to see the connection between their feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. So where you and I can kind of, oh, he left the party because he was mad about the bike, that was an easy connection for me to make. It didn't connect for my son, even though he's older, and it seemed pretty obvious to me. It wasn't a connection that he made until we talked later on that evening. So sometimes they need help in making these connections. And then they have a hard time with understanding, expressing their own emotional reactions. So my son was exhibiting anger towards his brother, and he didn't really understand. It was more sadness that he was experiencing. He just saw the anger. And I think it's really easy for us to go to anger. I think I go to anger sometimes too. That's kind of that first emotion that you go to. But when we looked at it, it was more about the sadness than it was about the anger. And so we made that connection for him too, which was helpful. And then children who experience trauma may find it hard to accurately read other people's emotional cues. And I've noticed this as well. Some kids are super good at it. They can pick up who's safe in the room, and they can read people's emotions really well because that's something that they've learned to do as a survival technique. Other kids are not so good at this, and they really struggle making those connections between how someone's feeling. And so it's helpful for us to help them draw those lines. And then they struggle with controlling their reactions to threats or trauma reminders. They may overreact to threats. I think we had talked about that last time with someone bumping into the child and they thinking everything was a threat. Or they could underreact. You know, they could just not react to really serious situations. They could have some really big reactions to a trauma reminder or a trigger. So on the day that they moved in, or their adoption day, or Mother's Day coming up, that could be a really hard day for them, and they could have a lot of big emotions around that. And they struggle with controlling their reactions during those triggers. They may act out as a way of reenacting patterns or relationships from the past. I know when I have kids coming into my home, they are used to drama, and they're used to lots of going on and lots of emotions, big emotions, and lots of chaos. Pretty much, it seems most of the kids that come into my home are just kind of used to that chaotic lifestyle. And so a lot of them will come into the home trying to recreate that, because that feels normal to them. I personally don't like chaos, and I really don't like, big, loud emotions. And so they'll come in and they'll kind of try to force that, bring back what's normal to them. And so whether it be teasing people to get that big, loud emotion, or whether it's trying to throw me off my game so that I will give them the big, loud emotion, they try to get that to happen because that's the world that they're comfortable in. And so they try to recreate that. Or other relationships. They might have some relationships that were not healthy. And so they'll try to recreate that, not because they're doing it to be annoying, but really because that's what is comfortable for them. They may act out as a way of increasing interaction, even if their interactions are positive. What's that saying, that there's no bad publicity or no bad press for a star or a Hollywood person? There's no bad attention for a child. Children crave attention, and they crave it from their caregivers. And if you're not giving it to them, they will find a way to get it. This is something I've learned over and over as a parent, that my kids want my attention. And at first I would be like, well, why would they want my attention as far as me yelling at them or getting them in trouble? It's because they don't care how they're getting the attention. If they can't get it positively, they'll get it negatively. And so they want that connection with you. And so that was a reason why they may act out. They also may keep caregivers at a physical or emotional distance. That can be a hard one for me, especially that emotional distance where they just don't let you in, and they don't let you comfort them, and they might not let you help them work through those problems. I am a talker, if you couldn't guess, and I love to be able to talk with my kids through this issue. We've had a lot of teenagers in our home recently, and when I can't talk to them and when I can't help them, that to me makes it really hard. I really like to be able to do that for a child. And yet I've had some kids come into the home that have put up very, very thick brick walls, not allowing me to even get in there. Did someone have a comment? Okay. And then they may go out of their way to prove the beliefs in their invisible suitcase. So, and that seems counterintuitive, right? That seems like, why would they try to prove that they're not lovable? Why would they try to prove that no adults can take care of them? Because that's what they believe. And so it makes sense to them that those things are true. And so they try to show examples in their mind of it being true. So they will force the situation and have behaviors that will make them see that what they're believing is true. So if they feel like no one's unlovable, so the instance of my son, if he has that belief that he's unlovable, then when grandpa gives an early birthday present to his brother, that's going to confirm his belief that he's unlovable. Instead of, thinking something else when grandpa gives an early birthday present to a brother. They want to make sure those beliefs are true, and they will see the world around them proving that those invisible suitcases are true. And then they may act out as a way of venting their frustration, anger, or anxiety. It's hard to use our words sometimes. I know it's hard for me to use my words. And so instead of using words, they could use big emotions and anger and mad, like we talked about, or anxiety. They could go to that spot where they're just more worried, like you were mentioning before, Caitlin, of just being really anxious about what's coming up next and how that's going to look, and is mom alive, and is brothers and sisters alive, and just that constant worry that they have in their mind. Have you guys any thoughts or ideas on this, or examples that you guys can think of? Oops. I did forget the last one on there with then they may act out as a way of protecting themselves. So they could use behaviors, and we've already kind of talked about this as far as survival skills that they've learned. They could use those skills again, and they're maladaptive in your home, but they do that to protect themselves, which is great. We want them to have those survival skills because that's how they survived in their world thus far. But in your home, they would probably be maladaptive because they have an adult now that can take care of their needs and that they can trust. But if they don't feel that yet, then they may use some behaviors as a way to protect themselves. Right here, this is that, we've quoted her quite a bit. Her full story is actually on page 4-19, and not her full story, but part of her story. She wrote a book, but there's more about her story on page 419 if you want to go look that up in the supplemental material. But this one says, whenever I feel threatened, I get this feeling that I want to hurt anybody who might try to harm me and my sister. Excuse me. I start cursing at the foster mom. I want her to lose control. I figured that sooner or later she would say something that would hurt me. I wanted to hurt her first. Later, I felt depressed. I knew I acted out of control. When I get angry, I don't even realize what I do, and I hurt the people around me. I feel sad that I'm not good about expressing myself. I feel like a walking time bomb. I hope I can find a foster mom who can handle my anger and help me take control of myself. This is why I love working with teenagers, because they can express themselves so well. When I have a teenager, and I'm guessing that she didn't express this to the foster parent, but when I have a teenager that can say this, I can feel a lot of compassion towards that. Now, I'm sure her behavior, I wouldn't have a lot of compassion towards. I'm sure that the way that she was cursing at the foster mom and that she was trying to make her lash out, that would be hard for me. I would be like, you need to talk to me respectfully, and these behaviors are not okay. But looking at these words, they invoke nothing but compassion towards her. And so for me, when I see these words, I could very easily think, oh, this must be so hard for you, and let me help you work through that. That's what we're talking about, right? The tip of the iceberg is her cussing at the foster mom and pushing her away and being that walking time bomb. But underneath it all is all of these emotions that she just feels like she's going to leave her sooner or later anyhow, that she feels like she can't handle her emotions, that she feels like she has to hurt others before they hurt her. So that's the big junk underneath that tiny little part of the behavior that you can see. Here we have the decoding the triangle again. And I think, well, let's see. Yeah, you do have it on your My Child worksheet, My Child worksheet 11. And then you will have to do it on your worksheets as well to turn in if you want to get the level 3 certification. So I think we'll just take maybe 5 minutes, not very long, and go ahead and do this. So if you can think of a thought or behavior that your child has, of the My Child, the child that we thought about the first class, and then a feeling that they might have, and then the behavior that they might have. We'll just take 5 minutes, so 9:30, and get that done. Oops. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can send an email to someone that's trying to join in real quick. Anyone had their triangle done that they want to share? We had a couple people share this already, but anyone else want to share?
I have mine. Can you hear me?
I can, thanks.
Okay. So with mine, it's with my 14-year-old. So she was self-harming, and I didn't understand, like even now, I still have a hard time understanding why someone would want to hurt themselves. And it's something that we've talked about because it still continues. And finally, like before, she just wouldn't answer. And then like one time she finally was like, I don't know, I can't tell you. And she was just like, I hate myself. And so I asked, I was like, oh, well, why do you hate yourself? And she blames herself for her and her siblings being put into foster care and taken from their parents. And I said, well, why, that's a big thing to like blame yourself for. Like, why would you blame yourself? And she said that it's because like when they were interviewing the kids and asking them questions about their parents, she said that she felt like she was tricked. Like the person interviewing them was like, look, we already know that you guys were doing this and your parents are doing this. Like, we want to hear it from you. And so she was like, she didn't know that. She's like, and then I started telling her all the things that she wanted to hear. And she's like, and then after that day, we all got taken away. So those were like the feelings, like the guilt, and like she carries that blame with her that they're all like split apart now. And like every day, like she worries about her younger siblings and if they're gonna be okay. And so that was, I think she already understood that and she knew that, but it kind of helped me understand why she was cutting herself and why she feels the way she does about herself.
That is a really good example. And so I'm so glad that you brought that up. Sometimes we think of these behaviors as those big behaviors that are loud and breaking things and are just really, the school principals calling us and getting us involved, or the resource officers calling. But those are really hard behaviors for me too to understand, that self-harming behavior. Why would you do that? That didn't make sense to me. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. And the connections that you've made there, I think, are really important. And then helping her now would be the next step, that you've made those connections help you. And now helping her, hopefully, to see why she's doing that can help eliminate some of that too. And not that we're going to eliminate those feelings, because those are some pretty big feelings. And we don't want to make her feel like her feelings are not valid or that they're not important, but just that we can have another behavior over here at the end. So maybe, instead of feeling like it's all her responsibility and it's all her fault, and then she has to take that out on herself, we can change some of those thoughts in the invisible suitcase or help her start. Because like I said, those are some really deep-seated big feelings. And so I don't know that you're going to change those overnight, or even the triangle will help her recognize where the mistake is. But you could help her see where she could start making some changes so that she wouldn't feel the need to do that anymore. And that's where I think this triangle is helpful, is just making those connections. Either it's helpful for us as the caregiver, or it's helpful to the child if they are at that point where they can start making those connections between their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And like I said, you can start anywhere. I like how you started with the behavior of cutting themselves or self-harm, and then you went more to the feelings and then to the thoughts. I always kind of tend to start with the thoughts, but it really, anywhere in this triangle is a good place to start, and then work your way through the triangle. So we already did that. Experiences biology. Parents are the active sculptures of their child's growing brain. Daniel Siegel and Mary Hartzell. I think I've mentioned Daniel Siegel is amazing, in my opinion. He's got great books out there. If you are looking for a book to read, not a light book, although, for brain research books, they're they're easy enough for me to understand. And I'm not a neurologist by any means, or I'm not very smart as far as brain and chemistry and all that kind of stuff. But Daniel Siegel makes it very easy to understand how the brain develops and how we as parents can really sculpt our children's brains. That puts a lot of responsibility on us as parents. This quote does. I feel like, whoa, I'm in charge of getting dinner and making sure they have nice clothes and getting to school. And I'm also the active sculptor of my child's growing brain. That's a lot of pressure, right, as a parent. And we need to recognize that it's not all on us. But we are part of helping them become who they're going to be one day. And so we need to keep that in mind as we're giving them a lot of experiences. When we're choosing to give them positive or negative behavior or negative attention, we need to keep this in mind, because we are the ones who are kind of sculpting and helping them to grow. And if they have traumatic experiences, then the opposite is true. They're not going to be able to grow and mature in the way that we would like them to as well. A lot of times you and I are not going to have a lot of say in the trauma that the child experienced before they come into our home, but we do have a lot of say in how that looks now that they're in our home. But it's important that we recognize that these traumatic experiences, particularly those at a young age, are going to throw off that normal, healthy development for a child. And then we as foster and adopted parents have to help sculpt that brain differently than the way it has been done before. And we need to give them positive and new experiences to help them create new pathways, to have this kind of brain that can help them grow and develop into a successful adult. So how can you help? And this is like, we're kind of getting into the meat of this now. So this is how things can be different, what you can do in your home that can really help the children heal from the trauma. So differentiate yourself from past caregivers. Make that difference. Now, when you're doing that, you don't need to be negative about past caregivers. So we don't need to say, you shouldn't have been swearing in your old home. You can just use phrases like, in our home, we don't use that word. In our home, everyone gets to go into the bathroom by themselves and no one else comes in. In our home, we've used that a lot. That means we're not necessarily saying anything bad about previous caregivers, because we don't want to get involved in that. We don't want to create any self-esteem issues. We don't want to be judgmental about family issues, because they might not be a spot where they can accept that. But we just want to let them know in our home, things are going to be different. In our home, we have dinner together every night, and there's food that you can always get to. So in our home can really help make a difference between past caregivers and you now, and the safety and the sense of security that they can have now. Tune into your child's emotions. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but just be aware of what's going on with them. Set an example of emotional expressions and behaviors you would expect. Did we talk about emotional container last week? I think we did. That is in section 4. So that's where you are big enough to handle all of their emotions, that it's not going to cause you to blow up and have a temper tantrum of your own when they have a temper tantrum. You are going to be the one who can show them how to handle the mad, sad, and angry. That, it's okay to be mad. I get mad tons, but how you handle that is what you want to show them, and give them that example of how that looks like, to be mad and not destroy property, or to be really sad and not to cut. Those kind of things. You want to be their example, and you want to contain all those big feelings. They need an adult in their life that is strong enough and capable enough to contain all of those feelings and not let all those feelings spill out onto the world. And they need to see how that happens. And then you can encourage positive emotional expression and behavior by supporting the child's strengths and interests. I love this one, and I think it's just so important. I've talked about it a lot. Some of these negative behaviors these kids come with, or survival skills that they come with, they we get so wrapped up in handling the behaviors, so wrapped up in making sure they're at school all the time, and so wrapped up in making sure they're being nice to their brothers and sisters, or whatever the case may be, that we don't recognize all of the great things about our kids. And I get it. I have been consumed with school resource officers and making sure my child is in school on time, or just in school. I won't even go with on time. And that has taken up all of my emotion and my time, that I've often done the same thing that we're talking about here, that I've forgotten that they are amazing at art, or that they're so helpful when it comes to yard work. And I put all of my attention and focus on, why aren't you in school, that I forget all of their amazing things. We really need to keep that balance. And it's hard, I get it. But making sure that we're encouraging the positive emotional expressions and behaviors. They want attention. So let's make sure we're giving them some positive attention, along with the required negative attention of, you have to be in school, right? Like, as a child, I never thought that was an option. My teenagers think it's an option. I don't know. I don't understand that. Drives me crazy. Correct negative behaviors and inappropriate or destructive emotional expression, and help your child build new behaviors and emotional skills. So last night, I had to drive up and down to Salt Lake in one day. And then it just so happened that I had to work the overnight in my other job. It was something I don't usually have to do, but I had to do that last night. And so I had 2 hours of the day free that I was going to just decompress and, eat junk food and watch bad TV in my bed. Unfortunately, we had this thing happen with the bike. And my boys have been struggling a little bit. One of them has had some significant trauma recently. And so they've just really been struggling. So instead, I didn't get to watch any bad TV, which is probably not a bad thing. We sat down and talked to these boys, and we did this triangle thing. And we talked about what's one thing you like about your brother, and what's one thing that you enjoy doing with your brother. And we really took a lot of time. And often that's what it's going to take. It's going to take that time helping them see where these negative behaviors start from, and then helping them correct some of these negative behaviors. So in the end, we all sat down and played Mario Kart. And surprise, surprise, Mom was in last place. And they were all very thrilled by the fact that I could not drive at all. They thought it was hilarious. But we were able to have some of these we were able to talk about the bad emotions and the negative emotions and work through some of them. We didn't get very far because both of them really struggle and they have a lot of trauma that they have built up. So we just made like teeny baby steps of, I can stand this little teeny part of my brother and I could stand to do this teeny little thing, playing Mario Kart together, and then they had to separate again. But we were able to do that. We were able to help correct some of these negative behaviors, especially the way that they were expressing these negative behaviors towards each other. And we were able to help them start to build new behaviors. Now, this morning, they still don't want anything to do with each other. The trauma of my one son is still very much there. But it was a start in the right direction. And it absolutely took my time. I never got that 2 hours that I was looking forward to just veg on my bed. But it was so worth it. And that's where, again, I love to be able to be helpful to these kids and to help with these trauma. Because I really think you can have a big impact when you can help them connect the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that they're doing. And thank goodness for Netflix. I can always watch my bad TV later on, so it will work out. So when we're talking about differentiating, take care not to buy into their beliefs in their invisible suitcase. So, what they believe about themselves, that they're not lovable, make sure that you don't believe that, or that you don't do anything to help them prove that. React in anger or the heat of the moment. This is a hard one, especially, we go back to that example of this, the girl AM cursing her foster mom. when a child is cursing me, that's not my best moment. I tend to get elevated. I tend to get a little bit heated, thinking, how dare they be so disrespectful? But it's important, again, that we're that emotional container for the kids, that we're not allowing them to make us lose our cool. Just because they're losing their cool and they're having a temper tantrum doesn't mean we as the adult would do that as well. And sometimes we need to step away. Timeouts is everyone keeps saying that's a big no-no right now. And I'm not here to debate timeout. I think there's sometimes it could be helpful for a child, but I know it's helpful for me as an adult. Sometimes I just need to take a timeout, whether that means I go to the bathroom or I verbally say I'm taking a timeout. It's really important that we do that. Excuse me. Take care not to take behavior at face value. So don't just see the tip of the iceberg, see what's underneath there as well. And don't take it personally. Another hard one for me. I tend to think everything is about me. I guess I'm still in that teenage mode of thinking the world revolves around me. But when my kids have big emotions, I think, well, what did I do wrong? Or what should I have done differently? Or what? And so many times it has nothing to do with me. So many times it just has to do a lot with their invisible suitcase, a lot with the trauma that they already came into my home with, a lot with just things that they're dealing with. I'm actually a very small part in their little world. I'm a big part when it comes to helping them contain all those emotions and make sense of that trauma. But a lot of the behaviors that I tend to take personally have nothing to do with me. And it's important that I recognize that. It's hard not to take it personally too if you're not doing your self-care. I won't talk a lot about that right now because that's, I think, module 7 or 8. But if you're not taking care of yourself, it's really easy to get into this taking it personal mode. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well. Tune in. Now, I wanted to bring up that this is on your worksheet as well. But it's referred to it as attunement. So I think it's question 2, and it has a question about attunement. So just be aware, because we've had questions about that in the past, that when we're talking about tuning in, we're talking about attunement. So it's really important that you're aware of their feelings. Excuse me, I've got the coughs today. That you're being that emotional container for them. That you're helping them understand confusing or out of control emotional responses. And that you are staying consistent, reliable signals to them that are in verbal and nonverbal ways. So that when their behavior right here, this kid that looks like he's stomping his feet and screaming is going all the way up, and they're at the top of their temperature chart and they are mad or they are sad or they are having these really big emotions, then you over here on the other side as a parent are tuning into those feelings. You are hearing and seeing all of those big emotions that they're having, and you are lovingly, consistently able to handle those. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about tuning in. That when these children are having these behaviors that, and you're not in bed watching TV. And trust me, I've been in bed many times. I've not been able to tune into my kids, but last night I was able to say, okay, this is a time that we can do some healing. This is a time that we can do some connecting. And so I was able to be that emotional container for my kids. I'm not always there, but it was a good feeling to be able to be there for yesterday. And I'm sending back those signals of, hey, I'm capable. I can help you. Let's deal with some of these trauma. Let's deal with some of these big emotions that you might have. When you're tuning in, you want to help the child identify and put into words the feelings beneath the actions. You want to acknowledge and validate the child's feelings. One thing that we will do, so as we were talking yesterday, my son expressed a feeling about something, actually about looking different than the rest of our family. He's Native American. And so we talked about that. I said, a lot of kids who are adopted feel this way. Have you ever felt that way? Or we talked about some kids in my home will feel like this. Do you feel that way? That's one of the phrases I use quite a bit. especially with children in foster care. So some kids that have come to my home have been really mad that they can't be with their parents. Have you ever felt that way? So getting them to help start talking about their feelings, or just letting them know that they're not alone in these feelings, that they, that there's other people out there that feel the same way, and being okay to be corrected. So if it's not how they feel, that's totally fine, and they can share that with you, but that opens the gate for them to start talking. Acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. Again, validate, validate, validate. You don't want them to feel like you're not listening, or that you're dismissing their feelings at all. So you want to validate those feelings first, and then maybe offer another idea. So in the instance where someone feels like your daughter or your niece, I think it is, feels like she's responsible for all the kids coming into care, you would instantly say, nope, that's not true. Nope, it's not your fault. You would validate those feelings. Oh, I can understand how you would feel that way. That would be really hard to feel that way. I am so sorry you feel that way. If you validate those feelings first and make them feel like they're appropriate and that you heard them, then they can start moving on. If I am expressing some big bad feelings towards someone and they just instantly dismiss them and say, well, you shouldn't feel like that, that's not the right way to feel. Anything that person says after that to me, I'm probably not going to listen to. There's no probably about it. I'm absolutely not going to listen to them. Anything they say after they dismiss my feelings, I'm out of there. Either I'm physically out of there or I'm emotionally out of there, but I'm not listening to that person anymore after they've just totally dismissed how I feel. Our kids are the same way. So even if they come up with a crazy idea that it's all their fault that they got put into foster care, which it is a crazy idea, we as adults know that it's not a child's fault that they're in foster care. That seems so obvious to us. But if we dismiss that feeling, then anything we have to say after that, they're not going to listen to. If we can validate some of those feelings for them and help them feel heard, that's where it's going to help them, and then they can start to learn and process. So with this tuning in, have any of you had any experiences with tuning in or differentiating? Have any of you had any experiences or thoughts or ideas that you want to share, questions? Help me mask my cough. Nothing?
Yeah,
So
I have one. We used to have a 11-year-old boy who would get really upset whenever we had to drive anywhere. He was really anxious in the car, and he was really reserved. He didn't talk a lot about his past, and so we didn't know exactly what the reasoning was. And then one day, we were going, because it was in St. George, and we kind of always go the same routes. And we were on the back road to the DCFS, and it's kind of like a mountainy area. And we were just driving, and I asked him how he was doing, and he's like, well, I don't like driving on this road. And I said, oh, okay, well, why? And he goes, well, my mom used to drink and we got in an accident on this road. And I said, oh, and so I was like, and I said, oh, that must have been really scary for you, and we talked a little bit about that. And then I asked him, I was like, well, would you like if we go a different way to the office? And he goes, well, like, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, you think about it and go enjoy your visit. And, we can, on the way home, you let me know if you want to go this way or a different way. And after the visit, he wanted to go a different way. And, that was fine. And like the next few weeks, I would ask him, which way do you want to go? And I let him choose. And sometimes he'd pick the mountain way. Sometimes he'd pick a different way. And then like after probably 2 months, he's like, we can just go the mountain way. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, are you sure? And he goes, well, he's like, yeah, you don't get in accidents and you don't drink, so I think it's okay. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad you feel that way. And, if you change your mind, or if you just have a hard day and don't want to, I'm totally fine going whichever way you want. And he's like, okay. And so, yeah, we just, I don't know. Yeah, just talked about it and worked through it, I guess.
That is such a great example of exactly what we're talking about. Thank you so much for sharing, and how you obviously tuned into him. And then and what I love about the example is that eventually it healed for him. Eventually he could differentiate between, you're not going to get in an accident like my mom did, and you are a safe place for me to be. And you gave him, so going back to that control, you gave him some control. You let him choose which times he would drive this way and which time, or how you would get home. And through you being that emotional container of this really big, scary experience and thoughts and feelings, he was able to eventually heal and make that differentiation between the two different caregivers, and when he's safe and when he's not. That's just the perfect example. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so glad that he was able to process that, because so often when we have kids that are in homes where they're not allowed to have those big feelings, or we don't have parents that are tuning into those big feelings, then these thoughts and behaviors just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Instead, what you were able to do is help him really get smaller and smaller and smaller until they were at a point that he no longer even had to go in a different route. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Did I hear someone else come on too? Okay, we'll go ahead then. I wasn't sure. And talking a little bit more about tuning in, it says, let children know that it's okay to talk about painful things. So again, going back to your example, you let him know that you were open to hearing about why the road was hard for him. If he didn't think that you were a safe place to start sharing that kind of stuff, then he never would have. So let them know it's okay, that you're not going to, that you want to know about the painful, hard stuff, and that you're a safe place for them to share that kind of stuff. And when they share that big stuff, that you stay calm, that again, you're that emotional container. So often I've had kids talk to me about big, hard things, and inside I am just screaming or just bawling uncontrollable, because the hard of the situation just breaks my heart. On the outside, I'm staying calm and trying just to be there for them. Like I'm thinking only about their feelings and thoughts at the time. Now, that doesn't mean I don't come home and talk to a good friend and say, I cannot believe this. This is just so sad, and just cry and cry and cry. Or it doesn't mean I don't go to a caseworker and, can you hear, this is what this parent did. This is so frustrating. You can absolutely have your feelings, just not in front of the child. It's really important, and not that you don't have any feelings in front of the child. I think it's important that they see us have feelings, but that you're not letting them control you, and that you're not letting your feelings become the primary focus, that you're really focused on them when they're sharing some of these big, hard things. Be sensitive to cultural differences. So a lot of times there might be things in their home or things that they've experienced that are different only because of cultural things. And so be kind of aware of that. Be reassuring, but be honest. So you want to let them know that they're safe now, but that promise that you'll keep them safe for forever, we really just don't have that power, especially when they're in foster care. So that I'll never let anyone hurt you again is probably not something that you could promise, whether you're a birth parent or adoptive parent or any parent, really. We can't keep our kids safe forever, but I can promise that you're safe in this home now, and that no one will touch you again. Or I can promise that I will do everything I can to keep you safe. Or I can promise, you want to offer them that security, that you're not going to drink on that road, but you can't promise that they'll never be in an accident again, that kind of stuff. So just be reassuring, but be honest. Provide opportunities to practice emotional skills in a playful, non-threatening way. So there are a lot of good things in the back of this module that help with activities to help with feelings and thoughts and stuff. On page 519, it starts there's some good books back there. There's some good game options. Some of these feeling thermometers and feelings charts, feeling charades, other practice activities, games and storybooks. There's just a whole lot of supplemental behavior. And excuse me, supplemental material and ideas in the back of this, the supplemental material in the back of this module. So I really encourage you to look back there for some ideas. This is also one of those questions that's on your worksheet, so just be aware. But some of these are really great things to do. And again, we remember we want to do these in non-stressful times, not when the emotions are happening. So we're not going to play feeling charades when everyone's on high alert and their brain is not capable of thinking through what's going on. We want to play feeling charades when everyone's calm and they can actually process the information we're sharing with them. That's a really important one. You don't want to give them a good coping skill to use in the heat of the moment, because they can't learn and process a new skill. They can't even focus on skills they already know sometimes. So you want to have all that practice with new coping skills and dealing with how to identify feelings. You want to have it down pat, so that when the moment comes and their brain is in that red brain, or the brain is shut down, however you want to phrase it, they are able to access some of this information, even though they're really struggling with big emotions. But they're not going to be able to do that if you haven't practiced this in low stress periods and times. We're not gonna play that. And you want to help them set an example. This is where I was talking about, we want to show our emotions. So we want to let them see that we're sad and mad sometimes. That's okay. But let them see that sad and mad and embarrassed and scared can happen, and nobody has to get drunk, or nobody has to get hit, or nobody has to get yelled at. That we can have all of these big emotions and they're okay to have, but that no one's going to get hurt in the process of us having these emotions. So we want to stay calm, clear, and consistent. Be honest and genuine. And let your child know that it's normal to feel different or have mixed emotions at the same time. I think this is a huge one. I think our society in general struggles with this, that you can feel this way and this way all in the same time. So you can really miss your parents, and you can really like living in my home that has food. You can really love your brothers and sisters, and you can really not like it when they tease you. Those things can happen all in the same time. And you can let them know that. You can and verbalize that. Show them, hey, I'm feeling this way and this way. And both of those feelings are okay. A lot of times our kids have not had adults that have been able to show them that these feelings are okay to have. It's just how we handle the feelings that the problem is. And so we need to be that emotional container again for our kids. We need to set that example for them. Every time we correct or help our children without losing control, that shows our child how to feel safe and how this can be happening. So every time they come at us with a big emotion or a big behavior, and we are able to lovingly, consistently, safely handle that big behavior, we set an example to them of how they could do that themselves. And so we need to keep that in mind. When we go back to that example of AM swearing at her foster mom, when that foster mom is able to come back with love and consistency and understanding this is just the tip of the iceberg, not what's underneath it, then that's going to be able to show that girl how to handle those feelings. When she comes back at her instead with her own temper tantrum and with her own big loud feelings, that's going to show that little girl that, you know, adults can't handle these feelings either. And this is not a safe place for me to put my emotions, because she can't handle this little tip of the iceberg. How could she handle all that's underneath it? So making sure that we're really there as an example for these kids. Perfect example is this one, again from AM. Says, one day my rabbit died. I started to cry. The rabbit was so small and defenseless. It needed me and I let it die. Then my foster mom hugged me. If that happened to my cat, I would feel the same way that you do, she said. She wanted my rabbit to be buried and offered to buy me another one. That's how I realized she wasn't a fake. I felt different at that moment. It was like she felt the anger that I had inside of me and was saying that it was okay to feel that way, that it was okay to be sad and for me to let my guard down. that it was okay to let someone into my world and let them help me. That's what we're there for as foster and adopted parents, is to let them know that it's okay to have those anger and that we're able to handle that, and that it's okay to let someone into their world, and it's okay to let someone help them. That's really the goal of this whole thing, is to let them know that there is a safe place for them to have all this emotion and deal with the trauma that they've had inside of them. With that, we are going to take a break for a second. We will come back at 10:07 and finish up this section. Okay, if everyone's ready, we can start again. As always, if you don't mind turning on your camera, that's helpful to me. If you're not in a place where you can do that, I understand, but it's always helpful to see your faces. Okay, we will keep going then with encouraging. As you could probably tell when we were kind of giving the summary for the lesson, this is one that I think is really important, and I think we miss as parents a lot of times. We are rightfully so dealing with a lot of behaviors, and these behaviors can take up a lot of our time, a lot of our energy, a lot of our focus, and so we forget this part. We're busy being that emotional container. We're busy differentiating ourselves from previous caregivers. It takes up a lot of our time to do those other things that we've already talked about. However, I think when we add this key part into it, we'll spend less time doing those other things. We'll spend less time being the emotional caregiver or emotional container. We'll spend less time having to deal with the school resource officer. We'll spend less time having to deal with those invisible suitcase things, those negative invisible suitcase ideas, because we'll be more focused on encouraging these positive behaviors. And I just think this is where we really can have a huge impact with our kids. In the past, there's probably been a lot of focus on the negative. And so when we can kind of change that narrative and focus on the positive, it's great. So catch your child being good. I know when I had a lot of small kids in the home and they were in their room quietly playing together nicely, I was likely just to walk on by. I didn't want to disturb the force in the house. Like, I didn't want to make anyone stop being nice or getting along. And I realized that was probably the wrong way to go about that. When they were being nice, when they were getting along, is the time that they needed me to come in and say, "Oh, you are just so amazing. What good brothers you are. This is so awesome that you guys can play together as sisters." That's when I needed to catch them being good. Instead, I would often give them the negative attention when they weren't getting along. "Oh, why can't you guys get along? You need to be nicer to your sister. You can't hit your brother." Those kind of things. So you want to catch your child being good. Those moments, and I get it. When you have a child, especially when they first come into care and they're dealing with a lot of trauma and they're dealing with a lot of those hard, big feelings of not being in their birth family or having guilt because they're not with their brothers and sisters, just those huge feelings that they have. Sometimes it can be hard to find the good. Sometimes you really have to look for those good times, but I promise that they're there. And every time that you catch one of those good times and you find one of those good times, then you build upon it. You see that one time that they walked by their brother and didn't have to hit him or touch him or bug him in any way, and you build upon that time. "Wow, thank you so much for walking by your brother and not touching him. I know that's really been hard for you and I really appreciate it. High five." Or, "You're just the best kid." Sometimes I would have little treats in my pocket and just, "Thank you so much. I just really appreciate you for being able to do that." And then you build upon those little times. So maybe next time he goes 2 times without slapping his brother on the head when he walks by. So you want to build upon those little times. And the way you do that is by catching him for the good time. Praise, 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 praise. There are so many different ratios that I've heard. For every negative comment to the kids, you need to give 5 positives. For every negative, you need to give 7 positives. For every negative, you need to give 10 positives. I don't know what the actual ratio is, but I know for every time that you have to correct or say something no, or I mean, it doesn't even have to be a negative comment. It doesn't even have to be you're a bad kid or something like that. It's just all those no's that you have to give your kids, all those corrections that as parents we have to naturally give. I mean, I have to correct my child, don't ride your bike in the front yard. That is a negative. It's a necessary negative. It's a safety issue. Of course I'm going to say it, but it nevertheless is a negative. And so it needs to be replaced by all those positives. And so, but you're doing a really great job riding your bike. And thank you so much for wearing your helmet. You're awesome. Make sure that you're giving a lot of praise as well as all of those corrective things that we just naturally have to do as a parent. We want to be very, when we're saying things, we want to be very specific in the way that, and the praise that we're using. When we when we use those overall general terms of you're such a good kid, or you're just so great at everything, or any of those general things, it's too much for our kids. They can't handle it. The invisible suitcase is still back there, right? And we're working on it. We're working on unpacking it. But if we're just saying you're just a great kid overall, and their invisible suitcase is like, alert, 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 you're not a great kid, then they might go out of their way to prove that they're not a great kid. I've had this happen so many times. I had a teenager in our home that had really, really struggled, and he got praised at school that day. Someone had said, and all the people that praised him were being very nice. They didn't recognize it was going to trigger him, but because I knew the kid at this point, I was like, oh, we're headed to problems. So I can't even remember what he had done at school, but he'd done something good and he got a lot of praise at school. Then he went to work, and his employee was just saying, oh, you're just the best employee. I just really appreciate you. You're just so hardworking. Thank you so much. And he got a lot of praise there. And then I think he got a lot of praise from an extended family member. And I was like, oh, this is not going to go well. This kid cannot handle this much praise. He has to, he's going to have to prove that they're wrong. In his mind, it was too unsettling with his invisible suitcase and all of this praise all at once on one day. And sure enough, that day, he snuck out of the house and went and robbed his employee's store. And then, of course, got fired, of course, couldn't go back to school anymore. Of course, I mean, it just set in motion all of these negative things for him. And I could sit back and I could think, I don't think he's going to do very well with all this praise. And I had no idea that he would blow it up that much, but he blew it up because in his mind, those things were not true. And because there was so much of the praise coming in at once, he just could not handle the dichotomy between all of this praise and his invisible suitcase. And so he had to prove that his invisible suitcase was correct, that he was a bad kid, that he was unlovable, that no one loved him, that no one liked him, that he wasn't going to, he had no future, all of those things he had to go out and prove because he couldn't handle all that. So be very careful when you're doing this praise. I like to be very small sometimes, and I like that you're doing this thing. This is what I'm very proud of you for. Not those overall, you're just a great kid. And then, so it gives you a ratio here, 6 praises to every 1 correction. I don't think it matters the numbers, but I do think it matters that there's more positives than negatives. Encourage and support the child's strengths and interests. Offer choices whenever possible. We've talked about that, how important it is that we give them choices. Do you want to take your bath before homework or after homework? Do you want to wear the yellow shirt or the red shirt? Do you want to go to this park or this park? Give them control and choices whenever possible. That's so important, especially children in foster care. They have lost so much control. they don't even have a choice of who they live with. They can't even choose to live with their birth parents, which is just such a normal thing that we should all be able to choose, right? And so they're feeling like their lives are so out of control right now. And I don't know about you, but when I feel like I don't have a control over a situation, that's when I'm most stressed out and most anxious, because I don't feel like I have any control over what's going on in my life. And so that's when I'm likely to have some big emotions, because I'm lacking that control that I really like. Our kids are the same way. They like that control. So give them it whenever you can. And a great way to do that is by offering choices. Let the children do that for themselves, even if they don't do it perfectly, even if if you have to go back in and maybe redo it. I've had many chores where I've had to go back in and re-clean the bathroom, or where we've had to, maybe do an assignment together again. But as much as possible, let them do it themselves, and see how they can accomplish hard things. That this was something that was really hard for you, and yet you were still able to do it. And it might not be perfect, but that's okay. We're all learning. So let them do things by themselves that can help them build up that self-esteem, that can help eliminate some of those beliefs about not being good enough and no one loving them and not being capable. Let them see that they are capable and they can do things. And recognize and encourage the child's unique interest and talents. I already talked about this, but I'm going to talk about it again because I just think it's so important. Our kids have some amazing abilities, and they might not be abilities that you as a family already value. So maybe you're a really athletic family and you really value sports, and you have a child come into your home that's really artistic. It might be that you have to look for that artistic ability, and then your family has to kind of switch gears. Maybe you're not going to a soccer game every day, and maybe you're going to art shows instead. Or maybe you're doing piano lessons instead. And that can be hard because we all have family cultures that we kind of get into. And so if your family is really outdoorsy and you have a more inside quiet person, it might be a matter of really looking for that. But once you look for it, you will find it in every child. I've never had a child that doesn't have something amazing and unique about them that you can really bring up and really encourage and cultivate in them. And so always be on the lookout for those special interests and talents, and then help them build upon it. Just like we were talking about, take those small little things and build them into big things, so that they feel good about themselves and they feel like they can accomplish something amazing. Help the child master a skill. We may think this is with little kids, but it's with our bigger kids too. It's with our teenagers who need to master a skill of driving, or need to master a skill of getting up on time, or need to master a skill of turning in assignments and getting organized. Or it can be our little kids and mastering, multiplication facts. Things like that we may just kind of take for granted and think, oh, this is just kind of the normal mothering or fathering way to do things. But anytime that they can master one of these skills, we can verbalize to them, hey, you did this. You were able to accomplish this. And now you can go on and accomplish this, and then this, and then this, and it can just build and grow. So helping them feel like they are in control. They had ability to control and master this skill, and then they can go on to have ability to control and master another skill. So help them feel that sense of accomplishment. I really think that one's so important. Any comments or questions about any of this? Do you guys have good ways of praising your kids that I always need some suggestions here. So.
I have something to say. I think with younger kids, I think you'll see the difference faster than you will with teens. With my 16 and my 14-year-old, they have the weirdest relationship. They're really protective over each other, but they can get really disrespectful and with each other. When they first came to live with me, they were really like abusive with each other. They would hit and like leave bruises on each other. So I had to intervene a lot and say, you keep your hands to yourself. And like we couldn't go one day without them putting their hands on each other. And so the next day when he didn't do that, I was like, thank you so much for, you know, not touching your sister. Like, I really appreciate that. And you could see he got uncomfortable and then went into her room and hit her because I said that. And I was like, why did you do that? And he goes, and he starts laughing and he goes into his room and like closes the door. So I was like, okay. So the next day he went without hitting her again. I didn't say anything and he didn't touch her. And then I waited longer, like they went a whole week without hitting each other. And I said it again and I was like, I really appreciate that. Like, you know, that's her sister. You love your sister, you protect her. Like you're not the one causing harm to her. And he's like, yeah, I know, you're right. Like, but it was just the weirdest thing because if anyone said anything to like one of them, they would like, no, don't talk to them like that. Don't do this. But how they treated each other. So it was like a weird relationship. And they're like that with all their siblings. But yeah, with teenagers, it really did, like the look on his face, he like felt, you could tell he felt uncomfortable and he like cringed because I was complimenting and thanking him for that. And so it did take time. And now like when I thank them for stuff like that, they're more used to it now.
The very first sentence you said, I think teenagers take longer than other kids, I think is so true. And that's a perfect example of, you know, them not feeling comfortable with compliments, and not being able to, you know, kind of trying to recreate what they are comfortable with. So compliments and being, you know, and having a peaceful home is not something they're comfortable with. So they try to recreate that. But the more attention you give to the positives and the more attention that you give to the behavior that you want to see, and the more safe you are, then they're going to be able to see that there's another type of life that they can and probably want to live. It sounded like he wasn't even aware that there was compliments out there, you know, like nobody had probably complimented him very much. And so getting that felt very odd to him. It was very new to him. And so the more he was able to get those compliments, the more he was able to, okay, this feels uncomfortable. I don't really know what to do with this, but I don't necessarily need to go hit my sister right now. I could just sit with this uncomfortableness. And then the more and more he's getting it, okay, it feels odd, but really it's not that uncomfortable. I'm okay with it. You know, and he's probably not even aware that any of this is happening, but his body is just getting more and more used to compliments. And they're getting more and more used to not having those big blow up experiences between the two of them, that they're getting more used to that calm and that containment of emotions in your home. And so it does take a long time because these teenagers have had years of having it in another way. So our younger kids, they've had less time where houses are chaotic and there's just a lot of yelling and screaming and fighting. Our teenagers have had more experience with that. So it's going to feel more uncomfortable to them and it's going to take longer for them to start feeling comfortable with it. Thank you for sharing. That's a perfect example.
Can I share something too with that? I was thinking about how she said it was uncomfortable with the compliment, like he cringed about it. And I think sometimes if we get a compliment for things, and this is on a different side of it, but almost feeling like, well, I already know that was a wrong thing. So it's like complimenting me for doing something that I know I shouldn't have been doing anyways, is almost the part that maybe it's like, oh.
Like taking it like condescending.
Not necessarily, but I don't know. It was just kind of like a thought that popped in my head because if people compliment me for doing something like, oh, wow, this looks so nice. It's like, oh, because it's not usually nice. Or I should have already been doing that.
I can see what you're saying. So
yeah.
you kind of have that negative self-belief then. Sorry, and Angelica, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I understand that too. I kind of thought like he probably took it as like sarcasm or like just that, like I'm being condescending, like, you know, like, you know, I don't know, just like sarcastic, like, hey, thanks, like you should have been doing that all along. But I kind of like the look he gave me, I took that as like the way he was. So like I said, he kind of looked at me like that and then just went in his sister's room, like she was totally minding her own business and hit her, like just to like I don't know. That's kind of how I took it. But then I like stepped back and was like,
Yeah.
maybe that's how I would have took it. But
It's
yeah, no, I get what
sometimes
you're
feels
saying.
like it's in spite. But it was
Right.
just a thought I had. I was like, I wonder if that's sometimes the feeling of just like, well, I already know that that was wrong, but it's just what I'm used to. And I think that's what's really hard about it. But I also wanted to make a comment about the choices, because I really struggle trying to give choices to our foster children. I feel like I always want to try to give choices, but then when the choice is given, it's like they are unable to make that choice or making the right choices within different activities. And I don't know how to help with that, because even with specifically like our daughter and her therapist, she'll mention sometimes like she's not even ready for choices. You kind of have to tell her what to do and how to do it.
And that may be, it can definitely overwhelm kids. I feel like I've got some kids that it takes hours for them to make a choice. Sometimes I think you just have to start small, like we were saying. So whether it's the pink or blue shirt and it's right there in front of them and we're getting ready for school, maybe you're not letting them choose the after school activity because that is overwhelming, but giving them a very limited choice that's right in front of them, very concrete, that they can choose between. I still do think it's important that they're given that opportunity for choices, because then they start to build that self-mastery, that they made this choice and it was a good choice, even if it's just the color of shirt. And so then they'll be able to take that and they'll be able to make the next choice and the next choice until they are able to make those bigger choices. But I do think, I can see what they're saying as far as it's overwhelming to them and it could be very difficult for them to make those choices. But I think it's important that you're giving them with as you would with any skill, right? There's so many skills that are hard for our kids, but to not do any of that, then how are they going to learn to eventually do it?
Right. And see, that's where I really struggle with it, because I'm like, I want to be able to give you choices, but the way that I think they're describing it too is she will almost only want to make the choice if she knows it's going to make you happy. She'll want to do the things to impress you or that will please you instead of choosing for herself. And so it's like, oh, which one would you want me to choose? Or I like both of them. What do you think? And it's like, this is for you. Like, well, you can make this choice, and that's what becomes really hard for me. And then it is kind of like, okay, should I just make that choice? Because then that's what you're almost seeking, to going back and forth. And then it becomes this battle. And I'm like, I don't want to make this a battle just by giving you choices.
How long has she been in your home? Oh, go ahead, Angelica.
Oh no, I just want to say something. I think the best thing is to just keep doing what you're doing, and to keep giving her, because I went from like having a really strict parent. I was living with my dad where he made all the choices for me. So when I went to live with my mom, who was the complete opposite and let me do whatever I wanted, I really struggled with making simple decisions and choices. Yeah. So I definitely think you're on the right path, and just letting her know, like, this is for you to decide, and it'll get easier, but you definitely want to start that, because like I said, I had a parent where he chose everything for me. So when it was time for me, like basically with another parent where I had all the choices to make by myself, I really struggled with that.
That's a really good point. Julia, you had your hand raised. Did you have a comment?
Yes, I was just thinking of several things. With choices, I found that giving very limited choices, no more than 2, but having them be things that you're happy with. Either way, you are satisfied with what they come up with, because kids can take choices that are things that you are not wanting that to happen. But if you give them like choices between, okay, which shirt do you want to go with these pants?
That's an excellent
and you showed
point.
the 2 shirts. And but if you say, which shirt would you want to, they go through everything in their closet, and it can take forever, and it might be something that's totally inappropriate. but or whether you're going someplace, give them 2 places that you would be happy to take them. And then they can choose between those, and you're happy and they're happy. It works for both of you. And the other thing I wanted to comment on, I used to teach a behavior unit at school, and they would sometimes even stick kids that weren't special needs in my class because they were such behavior problems. But that rewarding kids, sometimes I'd have to start with the simplest thing. Thank you for getting your pencil out to be ready for what we're doing. Thanking them for different things as they were approximating what you were wanting them to be doing all the time without you saying anything. And sometimes it's really hard to find the good, but that was always my motto, is find the good. And kids eventually come around and they'll work with you and do things for you that they wouldn't for any other teacher. When I was a teacher, I saw that because they knew that I cared about them because I was complimenting them and noticing the good things and not just the bad things. And so I just think that's so important that we do dwell on finding the good things. And if we can find several good things every day, the kid's like, oh, she really knows me. She really cares what's happening to me. And it changes their whole attitude, because once they realize that you care, they're much more cooperative with everything.
Thank you so much for your comments. I think they're so wonderful and so dead on. Just I love your motto of find the good. I think that's really important. Lixian, did you have some other comments?
Just mostly like I've tried to make them very simple and always making them appropriate choices of saying like, these are both really great places we can go. These are 2 things that you can have for snack. But she'll just like stand there staring at me being like, okay, like which one should I do? And I'm like, both are really great things. And it comes to this point of just like, we're both standing there like, are you going to make a choice? Do you want one of these? And then I'll be like, okay, I'm going to just leave these on the counter. You can choose one. And then she won't. So then it comes to this point of just being like, okay, I'm just going to, I have to choose one for you, or like, do you want these? And then it's like, she's not quite ready to compromise, but then I try to encourage. I'm like, do you want either one of these, or should we have another option? Like, do you want to try compromising to have something else? And it's like, she's not there yet because she's not even trying to make those choices. Like going back to the shirt thing, I will give her 2 shirts. Hey, these will both look really great with the pants you chose out. And she'll like make one choice kind of thing. But then she'll look at the shirts and just be like, well, which one do you want? I was like, I don't care which one you have. I'm going to set these here then. You get dressed. I'll leave. I'll come back. And she's still just like standing there staring at the shirts.
And so hard. I think you've hit on a couple different things that I might try. One is that this shirt will go good with the pants you've already chosen. So she already made a choice, right, with the pants, and pants are a little bit easier to choose from, but I would build upon that choice. She made that choice of what pants to wear. And that might be in just kind of a natural, or she made the choice of what shoes, or she made the choice to get up that morning, and just say, hey, thanks for making that choice, and make those connections of, hey, you made this choice, you were capable of it. And then you also said with time. And I think that's what's going to, and that's why I'd asked that question of how long she'd been in your home so far, because sometimes it takes kids longer than other kids because of the trauma, because of whatever, our personalities, whatever the case may be. It takes them longer to have that felt safety that we've talked about than it does other kids. And it's not because you're not providing safety. You absolutely are. You are doing all of the things that you're supposed to be as far as choices and helping her feel safe. But she hasn't got to that point yet where she feels safe enough to make a choice that's different than yours. And so I would go back to just creating that safety for her, helping her feel safe so that when she is ready, and then helping her build upon the choices that she's already done, that she's already making, that she probably doesn't even realize, and they're probably not even conscious choices for her, but just saying, hey, you did make that choice. You did a great job. I maybe would have chosen these other jeans, like that look exactly the same, and let her know that you chose something that I wouldn't have chosen, and we still, I love you and let's give you a hug, and building and creating that felt safety, I think would be just so important, because every kid is different. And although I have no doubt that you are a safe place for her and that you are doing all you can, it might just take her time before she starts feeling that felt safety versus the physical safety.
Yeah, she's 8 and it's been in our home for 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's still like, oh, these little things that pop up, and I'm just like, I don't know. I can't do this right now. So I'm gonna go take a break. These are the choices. You can make you can do this. But I really like that, giving some of that time, and then being able to recognize the other choices she has already made.
Yeah. And I think you'll get there. But again, the trauma is just so different for each of the kids that have come into our home. Sometimes it's just so hard to figure out what it is that's going to help them. And in my experience, time is the thing that's going to help them the most. So hopefully that will work. But then I have some kids that I just have to do the same thing you did, just walk away. I'm like, I can just not be here anymore for this constant debate. I will be in the other room. Okay, this activity.
Can I say something
Oh.
about that quick?
Oh yes, please do.
It just sounds so much like my little girl. She came to me at like 1.5, and literally for the first 1.5 years, she would not make any choices. And I did the whole, like, just give her 2 things, nothing worked. And then finally, like, I just started every day, every single choice I made, I would discuss it out loud. So if I was deciding what to wear and I knew what I was going to wear, I would still hold up 2 outfits and out loud, where she was watching me, be like, what do I want to wear today? Do I want to wear this, or do I want, and kind of like have a discussion, or like, what should I have for breakfast? And like, she would be watching me, and I would just say all of my choices like out loud, like I was self-narrating. And probably like within 2 months, I was still offering her options and still nothing. And then finally she would slowly start to be like, oh, maybe I want this. And I'd be like, great. And I'd give it to her. And so that really helped, is just me. And like, my husband would try to do it, but he had a harder time like remembering. So I'd be like, hey, say what you're doing out loud. So, but yeah, like just all the time, just self-narrating, because you make a million choices a day that you don't think about. But if you start narrating your own, there's a million opportunities a day for her to watch you make choices. And sometimes I'd pick one, and then a couple minutes later, I'd be like, you know what? I don't like that choice. I'm going to change my mind. So that, and, let her know, like, yeah, it's not like a permanent thing. Like, your world's not going to end if you don't like the choice you made. And that, I think, really made the big switch, was watching someone else make all these choices.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, because that is a wonderful idea. And we talked about that as far as us setting examples. And so I think that's an awesome idea, because it shows, like, all those things that you were saying. It's okay to kind of have that conversation in your head. It's okay to make one choice and then choose another. All of those things. Wonderful idea. Thank you. Sounds like you need to start talking out loud, Lixiane.
Absolutely. I definitely need to do that more, because I'm very much more internalizing things, and then I'll like walk them out. But
great idea. Thank you for making that comment. That's, again, why I just love comments and why I love teaching this class. I get so many good ideas from you guys. So thank you very much. Okay, this activity that we're going to do is a lot funner when we can do it if we're all in the same room, because I bring chocolate, and we can't do chocolate. I can't get you chocolate. I'm sorry. But if you could get out just a piece of paper and a pen, or if you have your manual out and you just want to we're just going to make tally marks. So if you just can get a scrap piece of paper or whatever. Usually if we're in a classroom, we'll do M&Ms, and then you get to keep those afterwards. But sadly, we're here. So I just want you to make a tally mark for each one of these things that have happened. And I'll read them to you and just make a mark for each time. And I want you to think about this last week, or even, well, today is kind of hard because probably got up and got in class, but just maybe think about yesterday, how it worked for you yesterday. So how many times yesterday did you compliment a child? It might be hard to think about, or maybe just even this morning, if you had some interactions with your kids this morning. Mine are mostly teenagers, so they're still not awake. But if you had some interactions, maybe mark that down. How many times did you say thank you to your child? How many times did you ask their opinion? Oh, whoops, I guess I could. How many times did you give your child a chance to do something for him or herself? How many times did you offer your child options or choices? And then this is one that I'm working on myself. How many times did you laugh with your child? And really these tally marks are for you. So if you're doing child or children, or if you're doing an hour or a day, just kind of keep in mind, do those tally marks of how many times you did those with your child. Now, on a different part of the paper or in your mind, think about this. How many times did you tell your child to do something? How many times did you tell your child not to do something? How many times did you tell your child to stop doing something? How many times did you have to impose a consequence on your child? It can be a big consequence or a minor consequence, natural consequence even. How many times did you ask your child what on earth you were thinking? So when we're doing this in class, when you can say yes to any of those first questions, you get an M&M. So every time you complimented your child, or every time you laugh with your child, you get M&Ms. And then as I'm asking the second set of questions, I take M&Ms from you. Every time you had to tell your child to do something, even if it was something that was a positive, and you weren't necessarily yelling at them, every time you had to tell them to do something or to stop doing something, and in general in class, most people won't be left with very many M&Ms, if any at all. They will have
M&Ms.
Negative. They will owe me M&Ms, which is again why I like doing this in class. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think I'd owe you about 25 M&Ms.
And most of us would. Most of us have more tally marks for the second set of questions than the first set of questions. And I can't stress this enough. Of course, I'm going to tell my son to stop riding his bike in the front yard, right? There are things that as parents that we need to take care of their safety. But then there's things that as parents that we need to let go, that, they may be driving us crazy, but we really don't need to be saying stuff about it. So like I had a lot of times with children in foster care, it seems they come in and they want to make noise, just all the time, make noise, weird noises. They want to, their playing has to make lots of loud noises, and they're just walking down the hall has to make loud noises, and they're eating dinner has to make loud noises, and that can get really annoying. But that is one of those behaviors that we can ignore for the most part. It's probably not the biggest behavior we need to take care of. I have to take care of my son riding his bike in the street. I don't have to take care of a negative noise that's happening. So you want to look at with those tally marks where you can stop saying some of those things and where you don't need to maybe make those comments that you're making. And then you want to, in the first set of questions, you want to see where you can improve on. You want to see where you could laugh more with your kids. I hate video games. I think they're of the devil. I think they're rotting my children's brains, and I am very vocal in my hatred for video games. However, I'll tell you what, playing Mario Kart with my kids last night was so much fun. I loved it. We laughed and laughed and laughed. They laughed at my horrible skills, and I laughed at their great abilities to play this game. And it was an awesome opportunity to laugh together. And I'm trying to work on that more, because as a parent, I feel like I'm not very fun. I feel like I'm just kind of doing the day-to-day things, and I don't sit down and have fun with my kids. So that's something I'm working on so I can get more tally marks there. What are the, look in that first set of questions and see where you could try to get more tally marks. Alicia, did you have a comment? Oh, no. Okay. I saw you came back on camera, so I just want to check. Check and see where you could, where you can improve on. Could it be more saying please and thank you? I try really hard, especially with my texts with my kids, because I have a lot of teenagers right now. It would be a lot easier for me to just say, take out the trash in a text, remember to take out the trash. But I try to remind myself to say, please remember to take out the trash, which is an extra word to text, right? But it helps teach them and me to be a little bit more polite. So see where that first set of questions, where you could improve. And then with the second set of questions, see what you really need to be saying. Do you really need to be talking to them about that noise? Do you really need to be, is the room that dirty that you need to say something? I've just kind of, with some kids, I've just kind of let their rooms go until it gets to a certain point where hazmat has to be called in, and then I get a little bit more involved. But I just kind of let things go. See what there really is that you need to be commenting on. You have to achieve that balance. I don't know if any of you have heard about that emotional bank, where we all have in a bank with our kids and we put in deposits. So for the first set of questions, we're putting in deposits. When we compliment them, when we say please or thank you, when we ask their opinion, we're putting in money into their bank. And then when we have to give consequences or say negative things or tell them no, we're making a withdrawal. You want to make sure that you're not overdraft. You want to make sure that there's so much money in the bank that it's really easy to make a deposit. So you've said yes so many times that saying no is really not a big deal, because there's so much money in that bank that it's okay to take a little bit deposit out once in a while. I love that analogy because it makes sense to me, right? I would never overdraft in my bank account for real, and I don't want to overspend or over withdrawal with my kids as well. I want to make sure that there's so much money in there that there's no chance of it going dry, no chance of bankruptcy. And so make sure that you're giving the 6 positives, 1 negative, or the 10, whatever ratio you want to use. But that's really important. So what talents and skills and interests can you encourage? Where can you give the child some control? What fun activities and interests can you share? What kind of praise would your child appreciate? Some of our kids like written cards, or some of them like that 5 languages, love languages. I'm really big into that. I think we all hear love differently. And so I've taken that quiz with my kids, and you can do the 5 love language quiz for teenagers or even kids. You just Google it. And they're fun questions to answer together. And then you can kind of see what is their love language. Do they like quality time? Do they like presents? Do they like verbal affirmations? Do they, what is it that really helps them feel loved? And then I try to make sure that I'm doing that for my child. Some of my children, quality time is how they feel loved. And some of my kids, verbal affirmation is how they feel loved. And I try to give a mixture of all of those, because I think we feel loved differently at all times. But with that particular child, I will try more quality time things. And with another child, I will try more verbal praise things. So make sure that you're using the kind of praise that your child would appreciate. A little bit harder when we have children in foster care, because we may not know them as well. And that's where it's good to use a range of them. So some of it could be physical touch. Some of it could be more verbal. When you're tuning into the child, you'll be able to see how they feel that love, how they feel feel appreciated with your praise. So make sure you're doing it for their language. What kind of rewards would be most meaningful? So if you're offering one kid video games and they don't like that, which is there kids that don't like video games? I'm not sure. But if there are, if that's a reward for one kid, but one thing, getting money maybe isn't a reward for another child. So find out what their currency is. That's a big thing as parents in general. Find out what motivates them. I have some kids that if I take away their phone, the world has officially ended. There's no point in going on. Life is over. I have another child that if I take away his phone, he's like, well, okay, whatever. I don't really use it much anyhow. It's not really important to me. So you have to make sure that you find out what motivates them the most. And then comment. Yes.
My parents would remove my camera. I had a really nice camera because I did photography. And that's what they would remove more than my phone.
Yeah. I had one son early on that I would send to his room when he needed a timeout, and he was in heaven. Oh, you mean I get out of this chore and I get to go to my room and read? Score! Like he thought that was the best. And eventually I clued in, but he was trying to get in trouble so he could go into his room and read, because in his room was bookcase and bookcase and bookcase of books that he only read 3 times. And so me giving him the opportunity to read that book for the 4th time, he was very happy about. So you need to be very careful about that. When we are correcting negative or inappropriate behaviors and setting consequences, we want to be very clear, calm, and consistent. So we want them to know exactly what we're looking for. And especially with our children in foster care, we have to make sure they understand what we're talking about. So when we're talking about safety, that they know what that means to be safe. When we're talking about this is what it means, this is what it looks like to me to be safe, or if we're saying check in with me, they could think that checking in with you means letting you know where they are every day or so. For most of us, once a day is probably not enough, or once a week. That may have been what they were doing with their parents previously. And so that's honestly what they think you mean by check in with me. You need to let them know that, hey, check in with me means to me, you're checking in every hour, or you're checking in every 2 or 3 hours. Whatever that looks like for you, be very clear in making sure both of you understand what the rules are, that they mean the same thing to both of you. Be very calm when you're doing it and consistent. It's okay to say, this is the rule and we're going to stick with it. Julie, did you have one?
Yeah, so I just sent my daughter for the first time to Lagoon with her friends without me there. And never done that before. It's a big mom moment right now for me. But there's another mom in the park, and she has her phone with her. And I said, okay, I need you to contact me, text me or call me twice while you're there. So I know that, so I know that you're having lunch, and I know that you're okay and that you're not being harassed or whatever. And I said to her before, I said, now that doesn't mean sending me 2 text messages back to back, and that counts. I said, you need to send me one before noon and one before 5, because they're going to be there until like 5. And I said, you need to send me one before noon and then one again, before 5. And I go to her and she's like, okay. And I said, if I don't hear from you by noon, what do you think is going to happen? And, she's like, like, I'm not sure, I'm going to call you. And do you want me to call you and, and talk to you? And so, so she knew that, like, if I didn't hear from her, what would happen if I didn't hear from her by a certain time. And then, because she's younger too, I said in front of her friends, when I dropped her off with her friends, I said, she needs to text me just so so I, before noon or when you guys are eating lunch or whatever, so I know that you guys are eating, because oftentimes kids forget to eat and then they get kind of cranky and then they don't realize that they forgot to eat, and she gets tummy aches if she doesn't eat. So they said, oh, that's fine, we'll take a group selfie and we'll send it over to you. And I'm like, oh, good. So she has that support, if that makes sense, to make it funner instead of, oh, I gotta text my mom. So yeah, I had to say, otherwise, I know you, Catherine, you're going to send me 2 text messages back to back at 5 o'clock when it's time, the day is over, kind of thing. So
I love that. So that's a perfect example of being clear what the expectations are, offering in a very calm way, and then letting her know what the consequences are and that you're going to follow through on those consequences. Perfect example. Thank you. I love that. And I would be the same way. I don't do well with my kids going off and starting to grow up by themselves and doing these big events by themselves. I struggle letting go a little bit. I'm in therapy, so it's okay. Target one behavior at a time. Again, you want to target the behavior that is probably the most unsafe at the time. So you're going to let the noises, as annoying as they are, go, and you're going to worry about riding the bike in the street. If they're, you may have a kid that comes in that has lots of behaviors because they're going through a lot of trauma, no fault of their own, of course, but the things that were expected in their previous home and the things that are expected in your home look very different. And so if you automatically expected them to jump up to this level, they would feel like a failure 24/7. They would never have feelings of success. They would never feel like they could accomplish anything. They would always feel like they were failing your expectation. But if you had the expectation for them just to improve a little bit on this just one behavior, they could do that. That leap is small enough for them to make. They're not going to jump all the way up to here, but they can absolutely jump up a little bit, right? And then they're going to jump up a little bit more, and then a little bit more, until they do get to this level. They can, and we should expect our kids to be able to have these behaviors that keep them safe, that are going to help them be successful as adults, but we can't expect them to do that overnight. We can't expect them to eliminate all of these survival skills that have kept them alive thus far overnight. Going back to time, and I'm not a very patient person. Again, I'm in therapy, so it's okay, but patience is something I have to work on, and I have to work on being okay with my kid being at this level right now and knowing that eventually they're going to get up there. But we've got to give them time to heal from this trauma that they've experienced. And we can't do that if we're focused on eliminating all of the behaviors at once. We're going to take the behavior that's either, usually with me, I'm looking for safety. So that's what I'm trying to achieve first. So I'm going to choose the behavior that's most unsafe. If you have a child that's coming into your home and they don't have any safety concerns, it's more just behavior or annoying behaviors, then you're going to choose the behavior that's annoying you the most, that's really disrupting your relationship with them the most. And that's what you're going to focus on. But if the first thing you want to eliminate is any of those safety concerns, so target that behavior. Avoid shaming or threatening. I think that says enough as it is. We don't ever want to make it about them. Constantly, it's a bad choice, not a bad kid. You made a bad choice, but you're still a good kid. But there's so many still good things about you. Making this one choice or making this one decision does not make you yourself bad. So avoid any type of shaming or threatening. And then keep the child's age in mind. And when I say the child's age, I don't necessarily mean their chronological age. We have talked about, and you talk about in pre-service, about how chronological age and developmental age are two very different things. And so we want to make sure that when we're looking at a child who's 12, we're not necessarily expecting 12-year-old behavior. We've talked about how the trauma impacts the brain's development. So if they had a lot of trauma at age 2, the brain was so focused on survival that it wasn't able to develop in the ways that it was supposed to. It wasn't able to develop the attachment. It wasn't able to develop language. It wasn't able to develop how to handle emotions, whatever the case may be. So it's not that the child's trying to push your buttons or trying to be annoying. The brain honestly hasn't had a chance to catch up. And so we need to remember that we may be looking at a 12-year-old who's dealing with some 2-year-old behaviors because of trauma. And we need to have our expectations fit that and not expect too much from them. And I've already kind of talked about that. Be prepared to pick your battles. Don't take on every behavior. Make sure that you have that ratio. So if you don't pick your battles, then you're more often to lose. So the bedroom, I always thought my kid's bedroom was going to be clean. And that was something that was really important to me. And I was having just this constant negative reaction with this child and interaction. And so I've let it go. And I just try never, ever, ever to go into their room. I say, keep your door shut, and we're just not going to go there. It is definitely not how I want it. And Hazmat has had to get involved a couple of times where I've just had to put my foot down and say, oh, okay, this really needs to get corrected at this point. But I let it go a lot further than I would have. And I have a much better relationship with that child now. So pick your battles, their room, as much as we may want it to be cleaned and for have a path to their bed, that may not be important to them. But what's really important is that they have a place to go and talk to you and that you have that relationship with them. So pick your battles, really a huge one. Focus on helping your child understand the links between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So going back to that CBT triangle that we talked about, helping them understand you have this feeling, maybe it's related to this thought and it's causing this behavior, or you're having this behavior. Is it because of this feeling that's tied to this thought? Helping them make that correlation. Even if you need to draw a triangle. So when my kids were in therapy with their therapist that used this, we would often draw a triangle here at home and start making that correlation. I think it's so helpful for our younger kids or our kids that need that more concrete learning, to have a visual reminder of these three things and how they connect. Understand the negative impact of his or her behavior. So one thing that we're doing with my youngest right now is when he gets into people's bubbles, or when he is poking at someone's eye, or these things that he doesn't understand socially as well, then we tie it back to, okay, then they're not going to want to be your friends, and you really want them to be your friends, so you need to stop doing these behaviors. You can't put them in the chokehold and expect them to want to hang out with you later on, honey. That's just not how it works. And so we've talked to him about, if you want them to be your friends, you need to learn to share. If you want them to have your friends come over, you need to let them choose the behaviors once in a while. And so we talk about that when the friends are not here, and giving him that base to start learning from when it's not in a high stress situation. And then we try to talk about it too when his friends are here, not in front of his friends, of course, but just trying to pull him aside and say, okay, remember, you want your friends to come over, so that means you need to remember their personal bubble. So help them understand that connection between what they're doing and how it impacts their world. And identify alternatives to problem behaviors and negative behaviors. So you can't just say, stop doing that. You can't just say, don't run out of the home, or don't touch your friends, like that type of thing. You need to give them something to replace that with. So instead of touching your friends like that, maybe give them a high five. Instead of cutting yourself, this is how you can have your behaviors. Instead of getting mad and coming home from an activity, could you try this? Or what do you think you could try instead? So don't just expect a behavior just to go away. All of us, even as adults, we need a replacement behavior. So I know that I struggle with healthy eating at nighttime. And so if I plan ahead and know that, okay, I'm going to struggle with healthy eating tonight, this is what some alternative activities I can do. Then I'm much more likely to be successful versus just getting to the evening time and not having any plans for alternative behaviors. I'm going to go with what's easiest and that I've done a lot. We have those brain pathways and they're really worn down. And so we're going to choose what's easiest if we don't have something to replace that with. So give our kids some replacement behaviors. And then practice techniques for changing negative thoughts and calming runaway emotions. Again, don't practice these techniques right in the midst of things, right when things are really high stressed, right when everyone's yelling and screaming and there's a lot of trauma going on. Practice it when things are calm. Practice it when there's not stress going on, when the friends are not there. Practice it when they're not having visitation. Give them opportunities to be really comfortable and feel very confident in their abilities to use these coping techniques. And then they're much more likely to choose those in those high stress times when their brain has shut down and they're in the red brain mode. They have to have an opportunity to practice these not in the moment, if that makes sense. So any other, before I move on, any thoughts or comments about any of this? You guys have already had some really great comments, so I appreciate that. We're gonna skip over. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing real quick and go on to the next module. And I will just mention again how, what are we on? 6? Yeah. How wonderful all the supplemental material in this is. So make sure that you're looking at some of that stuff too. In the back of each module, there's a lot of good, helpful stuff. Let's see. Oh, nope, I've got the wrong one still up. Hold on one second. Oh, there we go. So much easier when we're in person. I can just flip to the next section. Okay, can you guys see that module 6? There we go. So connection and healing. I think I probably say this for every module, but I just think this is a really important module too. I guess that's why they have so many great modules in here and 8 of them, because I think this one can be really helpful to our children as well. So with this module, it says, when you feel connected to something, that connection immediately gives you a purpose for living. What a great thought there. So in this module, we're going to talk about how we can connect and heal. So the essential elements, I guess they talk about it later, but is respecting and supporting positive, stable, enduring relationships, and helping your child develop a strength-based understanding of his or her own life story. So all of us have these connections in our life that help us build and grow and become a better person. Sometimes our kids come into our home and they haven't had those connections, but they have had some positive experiences with their family. And we need to recognize that they have these connections, whether they're positive or negative, they have these connections. And even our children that come to us from the hospital or come to us as infants, they have some of those connections too. So it's really important that we help build upon any of those connections that they have so that they can go on to be successful. Kind of like we were talking about with their behaviors, take those small little things and make them grow into something bigger. So when we're talking about this, it says what helps keeps you connected? Obviously our relationships, our family, friends, coworkers, our life stories, our history, our journals, our personal and family, our cultural life stories from the past, the present, and the future. My kids know how we're going to celebrate 4th of July, and that's important to them. They know a family vacation that we're going to take. They also know how we did celebrate 4th of July and some of those family cultural values that were important to us. And that's really important. Oh, wow, we've grown past the time. You know what, I'm gonna give you just a couple minute break. I didn't realize what time it was. We're speeding on by. We'll give you till 11:13, really quick to just take a break and go do what you need to do, and then we'll come back. Okay, so talking about what keeps you connected, and those life stories, relationships, all those kind of things that are really important to us. they're why we get up in the morning, right? Like if I didn't have you guys coming to be in this class, I probably would be still in bed. Or if I didn't have my kids, it's, you know, we there's just no purpose in life if we don't have these relationships, we don't have these life stories about who we are and how we like to do things, our past, present, and future. They really make us who we are. And our kids are the same way. Places, things, rituals, practices, that helps us keep connected to the world around us as well. We're going to skip this activity real quick. Children define themselves through their connection. And this is true even if they've had some negative experiences. So when I first started being a foster parent, it was so weird to me that these kids could be treated so horrible and have so much harm done to them, and yet still love their parents. And I've come to understand that that's because of who they are. These are the connections that they have in the world. So it helps them understand who they are, what is lovable about them, what they're capable of. How can I survive and make sense out of what happened to me? So through these connections that in their past and in their present, that's how they're going to survive and make sense of what happened to them. The perfect example of going down this road wasn't safe before. And now that I've gone down this road so many times with someone that doesn't drink and that someone that's safe, I can make sense that I'm going to be able to go down this road again. And then who will I be in the future? All of this helps our kids to kind of define who they are and make those connections and then go on to be successful adults. This is a quote from a child in foster care. It says, being taken away from my parents didn't bother me, but being torn away from my brothers and sisters, they were my whole life. It was probably the most painful thing in the world. They told me I wouldn't be able to see them a lot, but I was lucky. They told me I would be able to see them a lot, but I was lucky to see them at all. Our sibling relationships are some of the longest that we have in our life. And they're so very important. And sometimes for various reasons, our kids lose that connection as well as the connection with their parents or as the connection with their culture. And that is a very important relationship that we're aware of and that we're striving to help build positives to. So even though they come into your home and there's lots of negative interaction there, because that's probably what they're used to, that makes them feel more comfortable. When you can start building those positives like you've been doing, Angelica, that will help them feel more connected and be able to be safe and secure. And they have to have that. So what I was talking about with the essential elements that we're going to learn in this chapter is respect and support positive, stable, enduring relationships in the life of your child. That may be birth parents in whatever capacity they can do. Maybe you go on to adopt the child, but maybe there's some part of their birth parents that you can bring in that's positive and safe. Maybe there's not, because I know that there's lots of times where our birth families can't provide that. And then we just have to accept that. But maybe there's small parts that we can pull out that we can be positive, or maybe it's in their siblings, or maybe it's in their extended family. But finding and supporting and respecting those positive relationships is important. And then help your child develop a strength-based understanding of his or her own life story. So obviously, if they're in foster care, there's been lots of negative things that have happened in their life. But I guarantee that's not all of it. There has been some positives. There has been some things that they've learned from trauma that they wouldn't have learned otherwise. Julie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so back to number 5. I'm just gonna throw a little wrench in it a little, because so when our now 21-year-old, 22-year-old, when she went back home when she was about 11 and a half, she went back home to mom, and I was very, I kept in contact with her, and I was able to see her and take her out, for lunch or whatever. And I made sure that every time that she was with me, that I said something about her mother. And I said, how's your, I'd be like, how's your relationship with your mom? And she was comfortable enough to tell me like they're fighting other than this. And I said, you need to make sure that you show your mom that respect. She's your mother. you know, and she's there and she's your mother, so you need to be respectful towards her. So I made sure that even though it wasn't a healthy relationship, it was still their relationship. And I did my best to let her know that I was supportive of that relationship, that that's her mom and that she needs to be supportive and respectful of her mom. She doesn't have to always agree with her mom, but that doesn't mean that she's going to fight with her mom in a sense. And I'm very grateful looking back that I did that, because up until October, she passed away. And I know that that's, no matter what, that's her mom. Her mom's her mom's her mom's her mom. And that happens as well with our blended family and exes is, you know, and I tell my daughter that when she goes to her dad's house and her dad's remarried, I said, you know, I hope you don't treat your dad like this. I hope you treat him kindly. I hope that you respect him and that you listen to him. And I pretty much reiterate almost the same things that I said with my foster daughter, because they need to know that we respect that relationship as well. And I say that to my steps as well. You know, I hope that you don't yell at your mom like you're yelling at me. You know, I hope that you're kind to your mom, and that when she asks for help, I hope that you're able to help her too. So that they know that even though some relationships aren't healthy, that they still know that we respect that. And we want them to respect that relationship as well, because I don't want to ever have her look back and say to me, you know, this foster daughter especially, and say, you didn't support my mom and my relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
Because I know that that can be very easily done when they're feeling sad or hurt or whatever.
Absolutely. And you vocalized it so well. It can be really hard when they're feeling sad or hurt or whatever. But I think it's important that we're still encouraging that respect and that supporting whatever positives we can pull out of it. So thank you for your comment. I think the hardness of it, and maybe that dichotomy again that we've talked about, that two things can be true, right? That there can be some really negative, hard feelings and emotions and bad things that happen, and yet there also can be some good that we can highlight and pull out of there. And I think that's what this is talking about. We're going to skip over this family tale. It's kind of long and drawn out, and we've had a lot of good examples already. Sorry. Okay, so there we go. Okay, it takes two to speak the truth, one to speak and another to hear. What this quote is saying is that it really takes that validation for our children to start making sense. So we can't ignore any of the negative that happened in their home, and we can't ignore the negative parts of their relationship. We need to be able to hear that, and then we need to be able to move on. And we talked about that with the trauma too, that we can't dismiss it. We can't say, nope, that never happened, or nope, you shouldn't feel that way. We have to validate before we can move on. We have to feel heard. Before I can start processing something else, I have to know that my feelings were important to the person that I was sharing that with. And our kids are like that as well. We need to give them opportunities to talk about their lives. That can be one of the greatest gifts that we can give them, an opportunity to talk about their lives in a safe environment with an adult that can contain some of those emotions. We need to make it safe to talk. Make the unmentionables mentionable. So make those difficult conversations possible for them. And that can just be an opening up the opportunity and then giving them a chance to walk through it or not. Sometimes they're not ready to talk about it, and that's fine. But give them that safe spot to talk about it if they want to. Reinforce the message that the child is not responsible for the trauma. So important that, that's one of the things I constantly say to the children that are in my care from foster care, is that this is not your fault. There's nothing that you did as a child that caused any of this. And again, that's after I validating their feelings, but it's really important that we recognize that they didn't cause all this trauma to take place. One of my sons who were adopted, he felt at 3 years old that he should have been able to stop his mom from using drugs. Now, at 15, when he was processing some of these feelings, he probably had some more skills and ability to stop her from using drugs than he did at 3. And so it was really helpful to us to say, okay, your brother is now 3. What could your brother do at 3 to have stopped your mom from using drugs? And then it was very clear to him that obviously a 3-year-old would not be able to stop someone from using drugs. And so he was able to see how it wasn't really necessarily his responsibility as a 3-year-old. It was something that his mom should have handled. Julie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so 2 things. Can you just go back over makes the unmentionable mentionable? Do you mean like, are you talking about being that safe space?
Yeah, I think so. So, if talking about the sexual abuse, if every time they talk to you start crying and you start getting so mad about what happened to them, they're not going to be able to express their feelings because your feelings are the priority, right? And again, your feelings are important, but you as an adult handle those feelings someplace else so that you are that safe emotional container for the children to have it. If they start talking about how their parents, hit them or hurt them, and you become so mad at that parent that they're not able to express those emotions because they're so worried about your emotions, and your emotions are becoming so the priority. So you need to make sure that you're that safe spot. And then 2, that not just for big feelings, but like make sure that going to that party that they shouldn't have gone to, they can come and talk to you about that too. You want to be that safe place for them in all ways.
Okay, and then the other thing that I was thinking of too is that sometimes bringing them up too often or bringing it up, that those unmentionables can be overwhelming because then they can say that's all you want to talk about or that's what you're focusing on. But I know when I kept in contact with this young lady, even as a teen, she thought she said to me a couple of times, why does she still do meth? Like, doesn't she love me? Doesn't she know that that's a stupid, And I had to tell her, what this is an addiction. Addictions are different. There's not a control per se for addictions. And that's your mom's battle, and it doesn't mean that she doesn't love you. And I had to talk to her about how just because you love something doesn't change their behavior. Yeah. And it can't change. And I think that even as an adult, just that idea of not drinking and not smoking, whatever, that knowing that those are addictions and that they're very difficult, if not almost impossible, depending on the addiction, to overcome, that it's not an attachment of love. And I think that's really hard to understand.
I always try to say loving you has nothing to do with being able to care for you. So the fact that they love you has nothing to do with their ability to care for you. They can love you and still not be able to take care of you. So that is a really hard one. Angelica, did you have your hand raised? You guys are such great students, raising your hand and all. Thanks.
I just wanted to add to that. That's so true. Like my teenagers, because they were taken away at teenagers, they had a better understanding of everything that was going on. But at the same time, it was kind of, they did and they didn't. They understood why they were taken away, but they never seen what their parents did to them as something bad. And that's because as far as like abuse, they were never abusive to them. It was more of because of their addictions, they were neglected at times with food and stuff like school, stuff like that. So they've even talked to me like it's confusing for them because they never seen as what they were living and how they're living as something bad. So they understand like, yeah, my parents were doing drugs, but they never hit us. They never, they never like, they hear these, they were in foster care. So they talk to other kids, my parents never did what those parents did to those kids. Like So, and so they never questioned their parents' love until now, because now their parents are clean. They're getting help and treatment. And my 14-year-old, she asked me, like, she was crying when I asked her, like, what's going on? And she's like, because she has her parents on social media. And she's like, I just don't get it. Like, why weren't we enough for them to get clean when they had us? Like, why did they wait till they lost us to do better?
So hard. And that you're that safe, you know, to me, that would be an unmentionable. That, you know, when I hear that, that would break my heart, and that would make me want to start crying and start talking to him. But that you're able to be that safe place and you can validate and not put your own feelings, that means that she's able to have that spot with you and that felt safety, and that's huge. And those are really big feelings. And I agree with what you were saying too, Julie, that sometimes it's hard, you know, we bring it up, and for whatever reason at that point they can't talk about it. That's why I mentioned making sure that you open the door, but if they're not wanting to walk through it that day, then just shut it again. And then a week later you're going to open the door again. Or, you know, when they bring it up, when they come knocking on the door, you're going to open the door and you're going to be ready for them, because not always are they able to deal with some of these things. And different developmental stages in their life, they may deal with it differently. I'm always really pro birth parent, and I, you know, with my children that we've adopted, we're always trying to say negative things. And I have a child right now that's really struggling with that. She does not want to hear anything positive about her birth parents for whatever reason. And so I've had to really back off from saying positive things. And it's not like I'm saying it constantly, but she's not in that spot right now. And I'm going to respect that for her. But that you're there, and that again, that you're tuning into their feelings and their thoughts about this, so that you can know when it is to have these safe spots. Provide an opportunity to correct, make mistaken beliefs. You guys have brought up a lot of mistaken beliefs about how can she, you know, not love me enough to get clean, or I was the one who brought the kids into care. When we give them the safe spot, we can provide alternatives. So again, we're validating first, but then we're saying, well, I wonder if a 3-year-old really can stop his mom from using drugs. Let's look at a 3-year-old that you know. And then we can start giving them these opportunities to think, oh, you know, all this time, my son thought that as a 3-year-old, he really should have been able to stop his mom from using drugs. But once we listened to those feelings and gave him that safe spot to talk, we suggested that, hey, what would a 3-year-old do that would be able to stop a parent from using drugs? And it was very clear. And then he was able to start, just from that suggestion, he was able to start changing his narrative a little bit so that it wasn't the 3-year-old's fault. So provide that opportunity, and then teach children that trauma does not have to define their life. It's part of their life, absolutely. And we can't take it away from them. But it doesn't have to define who they are for the rest of their life. It doesn't have to make all their choices from them. They can, just like they accomplished this one little step of choosing a pink shirt over an orange shirt, and then they accomplished the one little step of choosing what to do after school. They can make those little steps so that the trauma, because they've seen so much success already in their life, the trauma is not going to define them. This is a quote from Harry Potter, for those that like this book. It's that Harry says, I just feel so angry all the time. What if, after everything I've been through, something's gone wrong inside of me? What if I'm becoming bad? And Cyrus says, I want you to listen to me very carefully, Harry. You're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to. That's what we can do for our kids, right? We can let them know that, yes, there were some really crappy things that happened in your life, but that doesn't define who you are. It doesn't mean that you're going to go on and, you know, that idea that our kids who come from parents who have used drugs are going to go on to use drugs themselves. That's not true. Our kids that have come from parents that have abused are going to go on and abuse themselves. That's not true. With healing, with loving, consistent parenting, their brainwave pathways can change and they can go on to choose a different lifestyle. And that's really important that we give. So back up just a little bit. one of the things I think is really important for me as a teacher is to give you parents that hope that things can change. I hate going to trainings where it's all the brain is impacted by trauma. This is how the trauma impacts the brain. These are the bad things that your kids are going to do. This is, it's just so negative. So as a trainer, teacher, I really try to make sure that all the parents go out of my classroom and feel hopeful that they can impact change upon their children, that they can change the children's brain pathways. And then what needs to happen is you guys need to go into your children's life and give them that same hope that, yeah, this was horrible, but you can change. Things can go on and you can get better and you can overcome from this trauma. And sometimes our teenagers especially will feel so like, this is the end. There's no hope for me. And we need to go give them that hope that we've gotten today or that you've gotten from some other place, that things can change, that you're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to. Something that I think is a really critical part of who we are as foster and adoptive parents. When we're talking about the trauma, expect the unexpected, expect to hear things that are hard, expect to hear it at different times that are not, that are hard to hear it at, maybe at dinner time when your other kids are around. That could be a hard time to hear some of these stories, but expect to hear the unexpected. Be aware of your reactions. We've kind of already talked about that. Don't overreact. Make sure that you're being that emotional container. Don't make assumptions. So sometimes we look at what our kids have gone through adult eyes. So you were talking about how, they never thought what their parents were doing was bad because it was just neglect. And we already talked about neglect being one of those types of trauma. And a lot of people in the world think that neglect is really not as bad as physical abuse or sexual abuse, but neglect has been proven to be more damaging to children. Now we know that as adults, but maybe that they don't see that. So don't make your adult views their views. Don't make those assumptions. And be ready to listen and talk openly with your child rather than avoiding the topic. In my home of origin, we didn't like to talk about anything. There were so many elephants in the room that it was really crowded. We just preferred to just keep all those emotions hidden. But that they're not going to go away. We can't just hide it. We can't just ignore it. We have to be willing to talk about it. Whether that's at therapy, whether that's, wherever the space is, we want to be there for these hard conversations and let the kids know that we're there for these hard conversations. When we're having that, you want to obviously stop what you're doing and make eye contact. When I say that, this is curriculum talking. In my opinion, sometimes eye contact is hard for some of these conversations. Some of the best times I've had conversations is when we're driving in a car because we're not looking at each other and they feel like some of that pressure is off of them. Or culturally, some kids are not used to eye contact. I've already mentioned I have some Native Americans in my home, and eye contact is about the worst thing you can do for them. Now, as a trainer, I'm taught to kind of make sure I'm looking at everyone and making eye contact, making sure I'm making that connection. When I'm being their parent, I have to really focus on not giving them eye contact because it's too much. It causes too much stress for them. So when I'm saying that, be careful that it's appropriate and that you're tuning into your child and what they need. And maybe they don't need all that eye contact. Maybe it's a better conversation to be had when you're driving and the focus is not all on them. You want to listen quietly. Don't interject a lot of stuff. That's hard for me because I want to jump in and quickly fix it for them. Or I want to jump in and quickly tell them, no, it wasn't your fault. I have to pause and really remember that this is their story. And I'm going to validate before I want to offer up any of my own ideas. But this is their story and they can't move past their story until they've had someone listen to it. So that quote in the beginning about we have to have someone hear us first. Provide simple, encouraging remarks in a calm tone of voice. So after we've validated, then we can provide that encouragement and in a calm way. And avoid shutting down the child. Every child is going to shut down differently. I've mentioned some of mine that shut down with the eye contact. Some of mine might shut down with a compliment. Some others might shut down, There's so many different ways that kids shut down, and maybe you'll try one way and they're going to shut down. And so the next time you have to try a different way, that's again where that tuning in becomes really important. Avoid anything that's going to shut down the child. Your big emotions could do it. So many things that could cause them to shut down. So try to avoid all of those. Any thoughts or comments about any of that? Okay. Kind of going on with this, it says offer comfort without being unrealistic. So again, avoid those promises that you can't make about the future, but you can make the promises about, you know, in our home, I'm not going to let anybody hit you. So you can't, you know, you can do those safety script. You can do in our home, you're always going to have food. In our home, no one's going to come into your bedroom. You can offer some safety, and we want to help create that safety, but don't make it promises that you can't keep, because then you're just one other adult that's broken their promises. Praise the child's effort to tell what happened. This is huge. Make sure that they know that you understand how hard this was for them to talk about it. That these are big feelings and thoughts, and you're really proud of them. Maybe they can only share a teeny little bit, or maybe they can only share a part of how they felt about it. Praise those efforts, because again, we're talking about, you know, taking those small little steps and making them bigger, making them grow into something else. So when you praise the small efforts that they do, even if it's not the whole story, or even if it's not all of their emotions, then they're going to be more willing to share with you again next time. And next time it could be more stuff, or next time it could be more of their feelings. And so once they know that we're a safe spot, they're going to come back and they're going to try again. If we're not a safe spot, then they're just going to get more closed in and more closed off to us. Provide constructive feedback. This is a tricky one, because sometimes they might be open to this feedback and sometimes they may not. If I was to have instantly told my 15-year-old son that, nope, he was wrong, 3-year-olds cannot take care of drugs, moms and drugs, that would not have been helpful to him. Again, we validated quite a bit. And then he was in a spot where he had dealt with a lot of that stuff, that we could say in a very constructive way, okay, look at your 3-year-old brother. What could he have done? But we really had to be very careful. It was really a delicate balance of knowing when to provide this constructive feedback to him and when not to. So be very careful, especially with our teenagers. I think that sometimes they're open to it and sometimes they're not. When we're doing this, again, we want to focus on the behavior of the caregiver rather than making judgments. So it was never about your horrible mom that was doing drugs couldn't have been stopped by a 3-year-old. I think someone else mentioned how this is an addiction, that it has nothing to do with her ability to love you. She can still love you and just not be able to care for you. So we don't want to make any of those connections. Again, remember, we're trying to create these positive connections with their past, not any more negative. They already have enough negative. So let's really make sure that we're focusing on the behavior. Absolutely. Doing drugs is a bad choice. It can lead to this X, Y, and Z, but that doesn't mean that your mom was a bad person. Drugs made you have to come in foster care. That sucks. That's horrible. But your mom loves you, that kind of stuff. So focus on the behavior rather than making judgments. And then be ready to share information with the child's therapist and report abuse or neglect that has not yet been reported. This can be hard, but so important, especially when we're talking about children in care. We've often had to take kids and report stuff again that the caseworkers didn't know. Angelica, did you have a comment?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
I tried to unmute it. So it's kind of on topic, but so I have a question about this. I have never been to therapy, but my teenagers do. So with the 14-year-old, she's been doing it for about 2 years now. And because of everything that happened with how they were taken into foster care, she had a lot of trust issues with opening up. So we went through a lot of therapists because she told me that she was afraid of if she shared too much, then she probably would get taken away again. Or so she was kind of closed off. She didn't participate. But we have a therapist now that she's really opening up to. But she told me that she doesn't think it's working because he just says, well, thank you for sharing that with me. And so I don't know if that's like how they're trained, but she said that she wants someone that's going to help her actually deal with the stuff. Like, I'm sharing this with you, like, what can help me feel better about this? And she told me that's what she wants. So where she's already been through so many therapists, I don't want to switch her again in hopes of, okay, maybe this one will do that for you. I guess more or less, since you're probably more familiar, is that how they're trained to just like, listen rather than like coach with some of that stuff?
Yeah, I think every therapist does it differently. So there's so many different modalities of therapy. I think in general, a lot of therapists will just kind of more listen and let the client or the child lead where they want to take it. But I also know that there are a lot of therapists that will say, okay, well, now what are we going to do about it? So I really think it's more of a personal thing. I don't know that they're necessarily trained like that. I think that some therapists are more comfortable in leading out and saying, okay, now you've given me this information. What are you going to do about it? And other therapists are more comfortable letting the client lead that. Julie, did you have a comment or an idea for her?
Yeah, so my encouragement would be to encourage her to ask the therapist directly or tell directly the therapist, oh, you always say this, and kind of let the therapist explain it, because it is very positive reinforcement to say, I hear what you're saying, because it's validating what they said. And he's probably doing like an echoing kind of therapy where he's just saying, I hear what you said. That sounds really hard, and just validating, like, I hear what you said, that you were abused and you are blah, 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 and you felt blah, 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 blah. And he's probably just echoing or labeling some of those feelings that he's hearing from her. And that's probably one of the methods he's using. But if she wants more constructive feedback, that would be something that she would be best that she ask, because it would also, and maybe that's something that you can mention to the therapist, that she's wanting more, she's old enough now that she probably could do it on her own, but maybe as a threesome, like say she's wanting a little bit more constructive feedback. She's not understanding, about your responses to her, and kind of let the therapist say why they're doing it the way they're doing it. And maybe that might, because maybe they might need to teach her, I'm validating your feelings, and this is how I do that, and these are the things that I'm saying to do that. And that takes education, and maybe that's what you both might look for, is having him kind of guide and educate you on what he's doing, how he's doing it, and if there's something that you want differently done or more done, like, okay, what can we do now? What would you like to work on? How would, because they, like Amy was saying, there's so many different modalities. Like there's that, here's what my false core belief, and here's what I heard, here's my false core belief of what I heard about myself. And then now what am I going to believe, and what am I going to change about that false core belief? And there's that, and that's a very traditional behavior therapy kind of way of doing it. But then there's the, okay, you just need to get it out. And some people just need to talk about it, and then they're able to move on. But some people need to talk about it and then say, okay, now what interventions or things can you do so that you can move on? So I would just be really open to the girl and say, and ask her what her desires are, and then say, would you like to talk to the therapist directly? Would you like to do it together? And just kind of see what the next approach would be.
And I like your idea too, because I think it empowers her, Julie, to do that. Lixian, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I have been able to go to therapy since starting as a foster parent because of that secondary trauma and everything that it brings out in our own histories and feelings. And so I've had an experience with our therapist and then our children's therapist. And I have to remember that they're human too, and they're having their experiences and the things that they want to share. And I definitely believe that they are trained to say, like, I hear you. Thank you so much for sharing that with me, because it is, again, validating. But there are times that I've had to talk to the therapist and say, I think this part has been really working. I think we're past that now. Is there something else that we can take the next step? And so it really is just be honest with them. Tell them exactly what you told us. Like, you've worked with her like this. She used to not be able to open up. Now that she's opened up about it, she's asking for this. What's the next step? How can I help in this process?
And I love that idea, because then you both are being empowered to take steps to heal. And I think that's just really important, that we take, you know, this whole thing that we're talking about is building those positive connections and taking steps to move forward to increase our strengths, so that when we are adults, that we can handle these things a little bit better. I think that's just really important. What do you, Angelica, how do you feel? Do you feel like some of that ideas will work, or?
Yes, thank you. I didn't know, because I'm like, okay, they're the therapist. Like, I don't want to go in and tell them how to do their job. But I think you're right, because they do know that she has seen a few therapists, and because of, they know about the whole situation on how they were taken. And that, so I think that's what he was trying to do, is build the trust first. And it actually took a lot for her to even discuss everything that happened with him. So we were already like so happy about that. So I think I definitely do need to get involved, because when it comes to certain things with her anxiety, like, I know she would have a hard time asking him for that. So I think it would be something us all three would have to sit down and go from there.
And actually, next, the module 8 is about advocating for your child. And again, every module I think is so important, but I think advocating is so important for our children. I just feel like, especially where their voice hasn't been heard so often in the past before, that we need to A, be that voice, and B, teach them to be that voice. So I love your idea of all three of you going in, because you can get the conversation started and then let her take it on from there. And I do think, you know, the therapist is probably a great therapist. I have said myself, validate, because it's so, until you feel heard, you're not going to be able to move on. But now, and which is huge and wonderful, she's able to express, I'm ready to move on. And so she just needs to let that therapist know that. And I think, you know, great things can happen. I think that's wonderful that she feels safe enough to tell you that. She obviously doesn't have that same relationship with a therapist yet, where she's feeling safe. She can come to you and say that. And so in a way, she's saying, hey, I need your help to help me feel safe enough in this spot to share that too. But kudos to you that you're a safe spot for her to share that. I think that's really huge. So it's important, going back to what, I know I took my slide off, but it's important that we share this information with our caseworkers, with our therapists, so that we can build on those small things and move to those bigger things. So build on that she feels safe sharing in your spot, and build on that and help her feel safe sharing it in the therapist spot as well, in that space. That's so important. Right here is this My Child worksheet. And we've actually done 2 of those today. And I didn't pull up the other worksheet. I'll just run up by it really quick. But it is that triangle that we talked about. So you can fill out that My Child worksheet. But this one right here that I had before that I can't get to, there we go. This one I really like, because I think, again, when we make it a little bit more personal to the child that we're working with, some of these skills become easier for us to understand, because we're taking it from, you know, just talking about it to actually doing it. So this My Child worksheet is really good to do if you can. It just talks about my child's connections and writing some of those things down. And then some steps I can take to help my child. So when you get done here today, if you can take some time to fill out, especially this bottom part, I think that's really helpful. What are some things that you can do that would help your child feel safe when talking about their trauma. And with all of us, we all have things that we do really well at and some things that we need to work at. I was talking about, I do a lot of praise with my kids. I say please and thank you quite often, but I don't have a lot of fun with my kids. It's really important that we can be self-aware. Hey, I do this really well, and this is an area that I probably need to work on. So that's what I'm working on. So what areas do you need to work on to provide that safety? And then what areas could you work on to help your child build connections across the disruptions of his or her own life? Maybe you need to work on having more sibling visits. Maybe you need to do a life book and helping them seeing the positives. And then what steps can you take to help your child look positively to the future? What special interests or talents do they have that you can build on? What things, the fact that your niece is able to share what she needs, that's huge. Build upon those positive things. What can you do that can help them look positively to the future? So those would be very important things for you to do. And like I said, I really like that this curriculum gives you this opportunity to do those My Child activities, because I think it takes it from just talking about it to really applying it into your life. And that's really important. As we're finishing up, and we're almost done here, so hold on for just 2 more seconds. It just has this slide right here about building connections through the disruptions. Document those positive experiences, those pictures, any pictures you can get, anything that's been good in their life, try to document that with the life book. Help reconstruct past experiences, so help them make a sense of them. And then encourage your child to look forward to the future goals and dreams. You want them to know that what happened to you was really bad, but it doesn't define the rest of your life. There's actually a lot that you can do to overcome all of that kind of stuff. And with that, is there any questions or anything? And one quick just comment I want to make is that you're not alone in any of this, that this is a lot. Like the trauma that they've experienced, they're in foster care because it's a lot of trauma, right? And so don't think that you have to do any of this by yourself. That's why it mentions including therapists and caseworkers. That's why it mentions pulling in other extended family. Don't think that any of this healing and you are the only one that can be this emotional container for them. There's lots of other people that you can bring in that can be helpful to you as well. And so utilize those other people in your lives too, because otherwise it would get really daunting to think that you were in charge of doing all this. There's people that can help that as well. So any other comments or questions about any of this that you guys have? You guys have just had so many great comments. I really appreciate it. Julie, yeah.
So something that I know it is not talked about often is big brothers, big sisters. Some of these older, younger, whatever kind of age, there is the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program. I know that oftentimes they gravitate towards other foster children, which is pretty natural, but it also can be hindering a little because then they're just both negative traumatic experiences or negative behaviors. So sometimes looking with something where like a Big Brother, Big Sister program is an awesome idea because they're getting someone that's already had a background check, and if it's okay with caseworkers and all that kind of stuff, where they have a positive mentor role model, they have another positive outlook. And the idea with that is that it is something that is a commitment as well for that big. So it's a year commitment to make those interactions, and so that they're having those positive, like going bowling, going to see a movie, and an outlet that's not just therapy or that's not a visit kind of thing. And so for those of you that don't have lots of extended family or people to rely on and bring in, it's just another resource that I know of that's out there.
I love that. And we will be talking a little bit more about that next week with the advocating part of it. But I agree, this is too much to do alone. It's just too much trauma. These kids have come into our homes with a lot. and we have to take care of ourselves. And in part of that is getting that outside help. So thank you. That's CASAs would be great. I know some family support centers have mentors. Make sure that you're utilizing those resources. Thank you. With that, I will let you go. I put into chat, and then I'm just going to remind everyone. I think everyone's been on before, so I probably don't need to remind you too much. But